Well, here we are. After 28 volumes, we're finally at the start of the climax. Part 5 has seen a lot happen, where Rosemine had to stand on her own, come to terms with her influence in noble society, and now an impending adoption where she's going to become the shadow ruler of the entire country? What are the next steps here? Well, now that she's settled her affairs in Ironfest, she's going into her 4th year in the academy, and based on the previous 3, the expectations are insane. Too bad this will probably surpass your imagination in pretty much every way. But before we go ahead and get into this volume, why not hit the subscribe button? That way you can stay up to date on Bookworm content from me. You can also follow a link in the description to check out some Bookworm merch for sale. We have an Ironfest Gremlin design, Rosemine Garden, and Dunkelfelger Ditter team. So with those obligatory plugs out of the way, let's go ahead and get into Part 5, Volume 7. Our prologue begins from Ferdinand's perspective. It's at the start of winter when more of his luggage arrives from Ironfest, but this year things have relaxed around him quite a bit. Mostly they're not going through his crap with a fine-tooth comb anymore, and included in his crap is a ton of food from Rosemine, prepared last book as a thank you gift for his thank you gifts. Thus the cycle continues. Great. Well, some of it does go to Letizia, so he lets his new guard knight Strahl handle that. He's the former Knights Commander of Arnsbach who was relieved of duty by Det Lind because he actually fought back against her, chasing Leonzio around like a lovesick puppy. But that also seems to be a running theme, where everyone the previous Ob trusted has been dismissed for stupid reasons by Det Lind, because they actually hold her to account. Clearly all she wants in her service are either puppets or yes men. Anyway, Rosemine's letter instructs Ferdinand to invite Letizia over to try these meals. And the perfect time to do that's going to be the farewell feast for Lanzanov, because he's forbidden to attend. You know, since Det Lind hates him now. Also, Letizia's too young to really hang around and socialize, so that doubly works out. Because Letizia was actually invited with Det Lind to the Lanzanov estate a few times, so he can actually gather some intelligence from her. So when the dinner date comes, and despite the food not being super faithful to Arnsbach's recipes that Letizia sent over, it does still taste pretty good. Ferdinand probes her about what she learned, and she's a bit slow on the uptake. She is only 9 after all. That's annoying, because Ferdinand actually wishes she was a lot more like Rosemine, and motivated by books instead of sweets. But the intel she provides isn't entirely useless, since she mentions that Leonzio made connections to the Sovereign Knights commander during the funeral. Well, that's worrying, but good to know. The incident at the funeral let him push blame onto Ironfest, while he slipped away to go consort with Leonzio. What's his goal there? We don't know just yet, but Letizia drops another piece of useful intel about a door at the Lanzanov estate that only the Ob can open. Yeah, that's the teleportation circle to the Adelgisa villa. If they had accepted the Adelgisa princess when Det Lind wanted to, who would have actually opened the door? Yeah, she would have looked like a fool because she hadn't dyed the foundation yet. Well, that's not the case anymore though, since she's ostensibly finished dyeing the foundation, and Letizia will be offering mana along with Ferdinand. That sounds like work. And Letizia throws up a shield to deflect that, by taking a page out of Rosemine's book, by offering Ferdinand some Lanzanov candy to try, and a toy in exchange for lessening her workload. Yeah, the candy's a bust, essentially just crystallized sugar balls that kinda look like face stones. But the toy intrigues Ferdinand enough that he wants to dissect it and figure out how it works. It's essentially a party popper that when the string is pulled, flowers or some such come out. Pretty neat. Alright, you'll see about lowering her workload in exchange for it. Later, after he tore the popper apart and Sergius delivers a letter from Rosemine, Ferdinand foreshadows ominously about how dangerous such a toy could be. I mean, it's not like they could put something else inside like poison, right? Well, that's his concern, but not his biggest one right now, because Eustace tells him to go easy on his brewing tonight, since he and Eckhart aren't going to be on watch after dropping off some materials in his workshop. And that's when Ferdinand retreats to go read his letters, and Eustace's report he slipped in as well. It confirms from Letizia's retainers about Raublut's connection to Lanzanov, but adds in that Georgine was talking to him at the estate. Now the final words that Sylvester said to Georgine are echoing in Ferdinand's head from last volume's side story. Yeah, things are about to pop off, even Ferdinand can tell. But what exactly? Who knows? But his biggest concern is what Sylvester and Sigiswald were alluding to with Ironfest's support. Rosemine very clearly danced around her answer for her Geduld, which really stood out because she would have just told him what it was, or just asked for clarification if she wasn't sure. He was looking to see if hers and Ironfest's situation didn't change, and the fact that she didn't respond is suspicious. So yeah, now he's worried. Either way, What he's making with all these ingredients he's gathering should help sort out the issue with leverage for the royal family, but ultimately his plan is to corner her at the Interduchy tournament and get some answers firsthand. Now, I already said we're looking at the start of the climax, either in this video or the previous one, but this one starts by laying out the puzzle pieces. Raublut, Lanzanov, Georgine, Detlind, Rosemine, and Ferdinand's mysterious project. How these relate and where they fit in will play out over the next several books, but it's nice to start off with a refresher. Back to Rosemine's perspective, and it's after the Harvest Festival, meaning winter is right around the corner, so she has to prepare for all the baptisms and her own trip to the academy. In terms of that, she can finally pick up the research Herscher gave her for making her own limited version of Schwartz and Weiss. Oh yeah, that got pushed to the back burner last volume, but all she really got for it was a list of ingredients, because the actual creation of which is going to be her joint research with Arnsbach this year, and luckily, Ferdinand left her everything she needs, so they don't even have to go gather. But while she talks that over with Hartmut and Clarissa, Gresha looks over the confiscated clothes for some baptism outfits. Alright, Dirk and Bertram are having theirs this year, but it's not just for them. The apprentice blue robes are also going to need some for the academy and such. So a few days later, clothes arrive for everyone to sort through at the temple. They pick some out in Melchior's room, while Rosemine heads to the orphanage to fit Dirk and Bertram in their outfits for the big day. While Bertram complains about how old the clothes are, Gresha chastises him pretty hard. Like she's just straight up not putting up with his shit, and even has to remind him that these are pretty big courtesies from the Archduke. Yet again. And if he wanted better, he should have just bought some with all that money he doesn't have, right? Also, if he's just gonna cause problems, bro could just end up executed. Yeah, Lorenza's told him all this crap already, but he's been so gentle in his delivery that Bertram doesn't quite realize how deep of shit he's in. You know, as the whole trial run for this Save the Kids experiment. If he screws this up, it won't just be his head that'll roll, but the apprentices and the rest of the orphans too. Hell, the temple could even lose all the good PR it's gained lately, and Rosemine's reputation would suffer a lot too, since she's the one who pushed for them to be spared. So this is a pretty big deal. Gresha's made her point, and Lorenz pretty much tells his brother that moving to the castle will be a big wake-up call for him, and before we know it, it's winter already. In the meantime, Dirk and Bertram pick their attendants in rooms, while getting some blessing practice in for their ceremony. And at the castle, Rosemine's prepping for her 4th year in the academy, where we find out that Ehrenfest isn't just doing 1, but 3 whole dedication rituals, because they're splitting the students by status to avoid med and lay nobles collapsing, though Wilfried and Charlotte are leading the med and lay noble ceremonies respectively. That helps, but they also got permission for her adult retainers to attend as blue robes again, so bonus. Too bad that's just a burden on them to prepare even more. Well, it's time for the winter feast and baptisms, and things are definitely different this time. First, Dirk and Bertram are low men on the totem pole in terms of status. Why's that? Children of criminals and all that. So they're literally the lowest ranked in terms of the med noble hierarchy, which is a pretty big kick in the ass for Bertram, who was the son of a Geeb. Yeah, he used to be at the higher end of that tier. Dirk's baptism does strike Rosemine as weird though. First off, they don't give him a noble name, he just stays as Dirk, which is kinda weird considering mine needed a new one so she would actually seem like a noble. Oh well, he's the first up and she actually has to improvise quite a bit. So as we recall, the hallmark of noble baptisms is registering their mana on their citizenship medal. This is how they know their elements at birth. Well, Dirk does have the mana quantity to be a med noble, but his colors are incredibly faint. Like literally he has every element, but it's just super weak, meaning he's very faintly omni-elemental, except for a slight wind prevalence that makes his mana a pale yellow. That confuses Rosemine, and she turns to Hartmut, actually expecting Ferdinand to support her, but he's not there, and he simply states that he seems to have wind as his only element. Okay, well, if that's what it appears to be, she states that publicly and moves on. A stir runs through the auditorium when Sylvester steps up on stage, as the previously bright mood turns dark all of a sudden, as the people start to piece together that this is the kid of a criminal. I mean, well, he's not, but he's assumed to be by the noble population. Okay, so this has been a pretty hotly contested issue in the fandom for a while now, but what exactly is the devouring? Is it just commoners born with mana, or is it something more? We'll get our answer later this volume, but Dirk's baptism is our first hint that there is something different about children with the devouring. Dirk highlights why Rosemine is so special by being in such similar circumstances to her. Bertram is up next, and his baptism is much more normal. Except when Sylvester comes up again, he takes the bold stance to make his allegiance known to all of Ehrenfest. He kneels and places his forehead to the back of Sylvester's hand. the greatest sign of gratitude a noble can show. After the baptisms, debuts, and Rosemine changing, she returns for the feast and gifting ceremony. Alright, Nikolaos is supposed to go to the academy this year. Not that that really matters much. But while she's socializing, she notices some nobles are really going to town on their food, which would have made sense like a few years ago, but why now? Well, those are the sovereign nobles sent home for winter. Hartmut tells her she doesn't need to greet them just yet. She'll get to know them more when she returns for the dedication ritual back home. Cool. Dirk and Bertram come to greet her as well, where we see that Bertram is actually taking on the responsibility of looking after Dirk as a noble, since he does lack the common sense of one. Good to see, as she wants the kids from the temple to watch each other's backs. That went well, and while they're having dinner the next day, they discuss the playroom. It seems to be going about the same as it always does, which is nice, since it seems the kids have an unspoken agreement about only getting bogged down in Ehrenfest politics back home. That's a good sign that they'll focus on interduchy politics in the future and at the academy. They were a bit worried about Melchior, as he didn't really get to participate in the playroom last year, what with that whole purge thing going on, but he's doing a great job in leading the games, probably because he's been playing with the kids in the temple. That actually helped him make up quite a bit from last winter. Anyway, on to more pressing news. Charlotte's order from the end of last volume is ready, and honestly, that's kind of annoying, since Melchior and Wilfried want one too. Wait, Wilfried does? Seriously? Well, yeah, dude's kind of acting like nothing really happened between him and Rosemine, which is helpful, but also kind of insulting. His tune sure has changed after their engagement ended, so Rosemine's wondering if there's really that much of a difference between siblings and partners, and Wilfried acts a lot like an older brother suddenly, comforting her that she'll grow up one day too. Either way, she places the order with Johann for Melchior and Wilfried as well, with their own designs of course. Okay, so I don't know if this is a puberty thing, or Wilfried just thinks he's smarter than Rosemine for once. Could go either way, honestly. We know he can sense mana now, so he definitely sees things different than she does, but he's also dense enough to take pride in basic realizations. I mean, I guess it doesn't change the conversation much with either reading, so does it really matter? Well, time to go back to the academy, and I bet you weren't expecting that only 2 chapters in, but here we are. She's chilling in the dorm where she can chat with Brunhilde for a bit. This'll be the last season she actually serves Rosemine, despite being pretty much absent from the story for the past few volumes due to her engagement. Hell, she even has her own chambers in the castle already, so she can't even enter the northern building without Sylvester's permission. But the question to Bertilda comes up because how is Rosemine even supposed to treat her? Well, she can serve her until she leaves, even if that's for a little over a season. She was looking forward to it too, so Brunhilde asks her to take her sister on as a retainer for practice. I mean, someone's gotta train her replacement to handle upper rank duchies for when Brunhilde graduates. And that brings up Melchior's retainers too. Rosemine got permission last volume to share them, so she's gonna use this year to train Melchior's retainers in the academy, before he even starts so he can hit the ground running. Good on her. So Brunhilde takes them under her wing as well. After the second years arrive a few days later, they head off to the gathering spot to prepare ingredients for classes. But this ends with Rosemine teaching the kids how to regenerate the gathering spot like she taught the adults at the Archduke Conference. The reason being, they're not the only ones who are doing it, as other duchies are now regenerating their spots, meaning they've taken on the initiative. So if they don't learn now, Ehrenfest will fall behind in the Divine Protections Department. That's currently the thing giving them an edge at this point, so it's pretty serious. After their success, Rosemine breaks from the pack to fly up and investigate the lights in the sky that first appeared when she visited the shrines. Yeah, she's finally gotten the chance to see them up close, and also notices that they haven't even changed since spring. Judith and her retainers are getting panicked as she flies higher and higher until she finally decides she's seen enough. Yeah, when she's high above the academy, it's pretty damn clear. It's a massive selection magic circle that appeared during the graduation ceremony and inside the Bible, and it just so happens to be centered on the Garden of Beginnings. Must be pretty important. So what's her plan? Well, if it's just waiting to activate, maybe she could just pelt it with a ton of mana? Like, I don't know, throw some face stones at it? Well, that could be mistaken for an attack. So probably not the best idea, but the bigger concern is the dedication ritual. That might actually trigger something pretty damn big with this magic circle in the mix. You know, since it's going to be held at the actual altar in the farthest hall, well, that might just be what she needs to get this thing to pop off. She's not too far off on that guess, but not in the way she's thinking. When the first years arrive, Bertilda joins Rosemine's service, but the biggest concern pops up that these kids missed a ton of study time last year due to the purge. So what's the plan to fix that? For the Better Grades Committee to step up and drill them. But hey, they have some adults here to help whip the kids into shape with some real-world experience. Hell yeah. But before they can even do that, they have to sort out the dedication ritual with the royal family. Since, you know, it needs to conclude before Ehrenfest starts theirs. Rosemine does need to be back for that. Enter Hercher, who puts an end to a running gag finally, because she actually got informed that everyone's arrived this year. She confirms Rosemine got her ingredients for their research, and launches into her usual talking points for the first years. So really, this fourth year feels like any other. We'll see how long that lasts, since the trend is the Academy gets crazier each year. While getting ready to leave for the Fellowship Gathering, Rosemine gets a briefing on the changes to the lineup as far as the Archduke candidates go. Klausenberg has a first year named... fuck me, I guess I'm butchering another one. Gentian, who will be working on the dedication ritual from their end. But aside from that, adoptions have become pretty damn widespread, so there's now a lot more Archduke candidates to help bolster their families, since everyone's taking after Ehrenfest's lead here. Before they head to the gathering though, she sees off Daniel Hartmut Cornelius and the rest of her adults, who are attending a meeting with the royal family to sort out the dedication rituals, while she's gonna be at the advancement ceremony and such. Cool. And at said ceremony, the major changes to the Academy's curriculum are announced yet again. You'd think everyone would be aware, but whether they are or not, the first years are still pretty damn frustrated they're not getting their stops yet. I mean, the value in having one is pretty damn apparent, aside from making magic that much easier. It also proves you're a noble. However, Rosemine explains that the benefit of waiting is much more important right now, and the first years understand. At the Fellowship Gathering right after, Hildebrand informs Rosemine he'll be attending the Med Noble ceremony since he got permission from his father. Crazy, since he's not even a student yet, but Rosemine's thoroughly impressed by all of his hard work. Bro's working so hard so he can get his stop early, get the Kruchersite, end Rosemine's engagement, and marry her. Remember? So of course he's gonna put in 100%. From there, they greet Gentian for the first time, where Rosemine draws the comparison between her and the other Klausenberg women she knows. That being how refined and calm she seems, I guess. But she asks for Rosemine's guidance in doing the dedication ritual as there's still much she doesn't know. Well, she's down, especially if Gentian actually wants to learn. Next up is her best gal pal Hannelore. Lestalot's graduated, so she's alone this year. There's not a ton to really talk about besides they've got a book exchange coming, so yeah. Pretty much the usual. From there, it's Juanchel next, where Ortwin proposes more research right away. With all these dedication rituals for Klausenberg's joint research, and their work with Frembeltag that was decided during the Interduchy tournament last year, they're not gonna have any time to do major research with Juanchel, but Ortwin really doesn't take no for an answer, and says he'll find something for Gundalf to entice them with. I mean, Rosemine's gotta head back to Ehrenfest, and work with Raimund on her library's magic tools. There's barely gonna be time for that, so now she's pretty damn depressed. Alright, well, let's skip on over to Arensbach. They're the next major player here, where Detlin's retainer, Martina, is their representative. They ask for a Ferdinand update, of course, and she drops the bombshell that they owe him a massive debt now that their foundation has died and he's dedicating mana to it. Wait, seriously? They have Ferdinand dedicating mana before he's even married, on top of delaying the Starbind and forcing him to do Spring Prayer? Yeah, now Rosemine's pissed. But since Martina made it sound like it was Ferdinand's idea to do this, it's kinda hard to tell what Arensbach is lying about to save face here, so she's just gonna kinda have to let it go. After that, they've basically greeted everyone who matters and take their seats. Now the lower ranks come to see them, and they all seem to love dragging out that rumor about Rosemine's adoption being cancelled, also that the royal family can shove her in the Sovereign Temple as their High Bishop. Immerdink's Archduke candidate she had some beef with last year says as much, but Wilfried actually claps back and says the king hasn't and won't make that order, despite all the summons that Sylvester got at the Archduke conference. And Rosemine doubles down on that, because, you know, she does rank higher than this girl. It's not like she has to take this shit laying down, so she says that if she was gonna be sent, every other duchy would have had to send an Archduke candidate too. So Ehrenfest wasn't shouldering this burden of teaching the entire country how to do religious ceremonies alone. Yeah, that shuts her up, because that girl definitely doesn't want to go to the temple, and thus concludes the Fellowship Gathering in her 4th year. We're clearly racing towards something pretty damn big because despite the changes and new faces, we're spending zero time with them. That's a pretty big clue how important this is.
Back in the dorm, she gets a report from Hartmut about the negotiations with the royal family about the dedication ritual. They were trying to decide how this would be done, because having it as a class would be pretty much ideal, but no, this is joint research, so it has to be on their one day off a week. Now, the Sovereign Temple wanted to hold these ceremonies all at once, but that was never an option. There's Archduke candidates and lay nobles in the mix. That would just lead to disaster, so it was decided to hold the rituals over the first 3 Earth days of the semester, with Rosemine taking the Archnobles first. Cornelius apparently argued with Hartmut to get it on the last one, so that way Rosemine could have some rest. Which is crazy, they actually argued in front of the royal family. That's a total Rosemine move. You wouldn't expect Cornelius to do that. So poor Leonore had to put up with that stress. Which means Rosemine plans to apologize to Eglantine the next time she sees her. Before she can start her classes officially though, she fires off some ordinances to schedule things. First to Solange, of course, so she can schedule the first years to get registered at the library. That way she can read. Then next, she has some things to discuss with Eglantine besides the apology. Namely, she's expecting something to happen at the dedication ritual. She doesn't know what, but Eglantine wants the details. And tells Rosemine to hang back after class on their first day of the Archduke candidate lessons. And on their first day of classes, big surprise, everyone passes their written lessons, with Rosemine passing her advanced rejuvenation potion practical with ease. But the following day, she takes the new students to the library to get registered, where she informs them not to touch Schwartz and Weiss, despite how cute they look. But inside the library, something is clearly amiss. Namely Hortensia. Schwartz and Weiss are still calling her Milady too, so she hasn't even switched ownership after 2 seasons? God damn. Yeah, turns out she was called home by Raublut halfway through summer and is taken ill apparently. Oh well, hopefully she recovers. In the meantime, she has Schwartz and Weiss show her to the new books, and this whole visit to the library reminds her about that Schlafdrams Flowers comment from Hortensia during the Archduke conference. Now, she did actually ask Ferdinand what it meant, but he doesn't know, so he said he'd look into it. About that time, the registration process is over, so she has to take her leave, but the Shumils stop her for mana. Oh right, Hortensia is absent, and the face stone she left is empty. Well, Rosemine asks if she should top them off, and Solange accepts. In fact, since Rosemine has to leave for the dedication ritual back home, maybe the library committee will have to step up and dedicate mana. Last we saw Hortensia, she uncovered something pretty major, but was oblivious to its scale, or that her husband was connected. Remember, he questioned her about what she knows. So, I don't have a good feeling about this. Her afternoon class is music, of course, which has never really been an issue for her to pass on her first try. Until this year, that is. Because even after she plays a satisfactory song, her professor shoots her down saying blessings flow when Rosemine is playing with all her heart. Right? No, blessing means she's not putting her heart into it. And that's a pain. Hell, she's not having issues with her mana like she was last year after circling the shrines, so it's not like one was just gonna fly out this year. But if a passing mark depends on a blessing, she obliges. That doesn't stop her from bitching up a storm when she's back in the dorm, however. Lieseletta doesn't really see the big deal because, you know, she's kinda bought into this whole saint thing at this point. So why not fire off a blessing when she's so good at it? Leonore offers another suggestion though. Maybe her professors are trying to bolster her reputation more for the adoption. But no, the adoption is supposed to be a secret, even on the royal side of things. But as it turns out, Eglantine was pushing for Rosemine to do all 3 dedication rituals to lend some more weight to her adoption too. So maybe this is all behind the scenes manipulation of the professors and shit. Who knows? But in other news, a package from Letizia and Ferdinand is waiting in her room, one containing the Lanzanov candy and party popper Letizia sent her. Cool, though the letter with it laments how Ferdinand dissected one to figure out how it works. In his letter, however, which contains no hidden text by the way, he explains the foundation was dyed and he was registered to help supply mana. Letizia too, though she's practicing with Face Stones first. Lanzanov left after autumn ended, and he wants to buy the recipe she sent over. Also, there's nothing about her Geduld, so that probably isn't important then, right? No way. She can already tell he's gonna corner her at the Interduchy tournament this year and ask. So she writes her response, thanking Letizia, but in shining ink, she asks what he's plotting by registering with Arnsbach's foundation. What's he planning? A lot of things. Never underestimate the Lord of Evil. The next brew class she has is with Hersher, where they learn how to make synchronization potions. Hersher teasingly asks the class if they know what this is used for, and Rosemine knows firsthand, of course. Ferdinand gave her one back in part 2 to search her memories, right? So she says it's to give criminals for that express purpose. And that response causes Hersher to wince. While true, that's a massive edge case for this potion. It's actually meant for easier mana dying for newlyweds. Yikes. So after she passes the brew, with ease of course, because Ferdinand drilled this into her head already, Hersher remarks again just how awkward her response was. But she can blame Ferdinand for that, he's the one who taught her. That does raise the question, why would newlyweds need help dying each other? Well, that's a better question for Florencia or Elvira, to be honest, and Hersher's not about to go into details. But she does elaborate somewhat, that people inherit mana from their parents in their birth season, but mana repulses foreign mana. Oh, that? Rosemind knows all about that sensation too. Wait, what? Never mind. Hersher really doesn't want to know because that sounds private. Anyway, point is, this is a bedroom potion, but that does raise a question for her. How long does it last exactly? She does kinda need to know. I mean, it might explain why she was baptized as Omni Elemental while Dirk wasn't. You know, since she got died by Ferdinand. Though, as it turns out, that's not how this works. Mana goes back to normal after about a month or so. Newlyweds have very similar mana because they're constantly mixing, but also a husband needs to pour mana into their wives when they're pregnant to influence the baby's mana too. That's why it's not really a good idea to take a second wife when your first one is pregnant. Okay, so at this point, they're really pushing what's appropriate for school. And Hersher finally sends her away, not wanting to give the birds and bees talk to someone who looks so young. But back at her desk, Wilfried and a fair few others overheard that conversation, and he wants to know what the hell she meant by having experienced mana rejection before. Well, saying Ferdinand's during part 2's Trombe hunt isn't really smart, but luckily she did experience this last year with her best gal pal Hannelore. That causes an uproar because holy shit, but Hannelore explains it away by saying it's not what everyone else thinks. Hold on though, why does Wilfried even care? Well, he is still her fiance publicly, so her remarks made it sound like she drank that potion to mix mana with him. So to clear that up, she says she's more worried about their recent surge of criminals who might have had their mana influenced. And the knights too, I guess. And I mean, that's an innocent enough of an excuse for people to drop the conversation as if nothing saucy even happened. She's 13, by the way. Well, technically 14, but yeah. She was worried about Ferdinand dying her permanently when the potion fades after about a month max. So that raises the question, yet again, why does Dirk have such weak elemental affinity when she's solidly omni-elemental? Again, answers are coming. There's a few major lore dumps left in this series, and one is this volume. Next is the Archduke candidate class, and that's a breeze. Rosemind blasts through without issue, though they do have to remake their foundations after last year since they ran out of mana over the break. This year, they're covering how to make replenishment halls and registration face stones, as well as creating and disposing of citizenship medals, stuff she's already learned due to Ferdinand's lessons. Though that doesn't stop the Vietnam flashbacks from Haas. Once she snaps back to it though, she chats a bit and we find out just how strange Ehrenfest's archducal family is, since they only have 3 adults and 4 children to supply mana currently. Hannelore says that their family in Dunkelfelger is pretty damn large, having more than 7 adults, because even her grandparents are in good health, so they easily hit the 7 people replenishment hall cap. And next year, Hannelore will have her father's second wife's son attending with her, and that's not even counting the many underaged Archduke candidates yet to come. Yeah, neither party here is envying Arensbach right now with 4 people total to keep a greater duchy afloat. Goddamn. After that chat, she plows through her coursework and the class ends, but she doesn't leave just yet. She does have that talk with Eglantine first, and she wants to know what's gonna happen during the dedication ritual. Now, Rosemind doesn't know, but it's more of a feeling and pattern recognition to be honest. That's a place to pray for a big ritual, and crap tends to go down in the academy when they do so. So basically just expect something to happen. Now, I guess you could say nothing really happened during last year's Archduke conference, but this year they have the Sovereign Temple helping with their actual divine instruments. Okay, well, in the meantime, Eglantine asks her to look after Gentian as a friend, but Rosemind's not too thrilled. Like, the only reason they're doing this crap is because of their joint research, but this was forced on Ehrenfest, and Gentian isn't really involved. What's really joint research about it? Actually, no, that's sort of a major issue here. No one really knows why they're even doing this besides the royal family wants mana, so suddenly they're in a big rush to talk it over. But just to be clear, this yearly dedication ritual crap is gonna end when Rosemind joins the royal family. She won't let them push Ehrenfest around anymore. that won't do, since they can't do this without Ehrenfest. But Rosemind doubles down and tells her to convey to Ob Klausenberg to study up himself. It should only take him about 6 months to learn the old language, right?
This interaction is honestly great because it's a subtle shift in Rosemind and Eglantine's relationship. Over spring, Eglantine tried to throw Rosemind and Ehrenfest under the bus to support the entire country, so she's holding a bit of a grudge. She puts on a smile and acts like nothing's changed in public, but as soon as they're alone, she's not putting up with Eglantine's one-sided demands anymore. And honestly, good for her.
But the next day, after passing more classes, Brunhilde races up to Rosemind to tell her Klausenberg wants to discuss their research before the dedication ritual. What the hell? This is literally the day before it happens. They can meet right before, but isn't that way too soon for a normal noble meeting? Also, weren't her retainers summoned to talk this crap over? Well, no. That was just the actual steps of the ritual. How can this be called joint research when the students haven't even talked it over? Okay, so it's decided then. They'll tell Klausenberg to meet before the ceremony. Charlotte and Wilfried will go too, since they'll be involved. But also, word came from Ehrenfest that Melchior is sending an adult attendant and scholar with blue robes to get some experience with the dedication ritual before theirs back home. Neat. And the next day, they head to the hall for the preliminary checks, as well as to meet with Klausenberg. When Gentian arrives, they rush through the greetings so Rosemind's people can get through the setup with the Sovereign Temple, but Gentian sends a few of her people along to observe as well, so that way they can finally get down to business. That this will be a brief meeting, but they can hold a more in-depth one later on. So has Klausenberg found an excuse to actually do this so-called research? And they have. Turns out their temple has some old documents like the sovereignty that they want to study, so that way they can revive old ceremonies too and increase noble interest in the temple. And that sounds like a damn good excuse for Rosemind to read over those records, that is, so they'll get her a transcription. But hey, this sounds like a nice theme of revival, where Ehrenfest can actually just skip doing shit because they already have. Remember that she dusted off the spring summoning ritual a few books back, and it's been doing wonders in their northern provinces? Yeah, they can basically just present that as Ehrenfest's side of the research to minimize their workload, and Charlotte will take the lead, since she heard the reports on it from Guy Haldenzel when she visited for spring prayer. So that wraps up their research talk, just in time for the priest to head over, where Emmanuel wants to observe the ritual. Again? Absolutely not. Bro was literally trying to use the nobles to help fill their chalice for the dedication ritual, but without approval, he has to pack it up and try again for the lay noble ceremony, where the priest might actually be able to keep up and join. That's a good point for Gentian to take her exit too. Otherwise, she'll end up wrapped up in greetings and probably have to stay for the whole ritual. So she bails with Wilfried and Charlotte just before the royal family arrives. Okay, this is our third dedication ritual at the Academy, so the events aren't really worth talking about. We've seen it before, but the ending is a bit different. Rather than a single red pillar from her Stab chalice, or the light show from the Divine Instrument version, the Academy instruments shoot pillars of each divine color up, that then combine into a single one before flying off into the sky. Wait, why though? Oh right, remember how Rosemind told the royals something was bound to happen? This was that something. Not that she knew. The big difference this time around is they're performing this ritual on the main altar. Not a smaller one. That means it has all the divine instruments on it. And even back home, they don't do that. So, I guess that means all the instruments react when doing the dedication ritual properly, at the actual main altar. Or, who knows, it could just be because it's at the Royal Academy.
In terms of what the royals were expecting, this is pretty tame.
They wrap the ritual and Rosemind asks if some of the leftover mana could be offered to the library like last year. And the king approves of that because they know how important it is now. But Sigiswald actually volunteers to oversee this process. That's fucking crazy. But how are they going to transport it? They can't just take the main chalice out of the farthest hall, can they? Well, Rosemind has them put it in her chalice, and off they go. No point in even arguing about her absurdity at this point, they just go with it. On the way to the library though, she glances outside and sees that something really did change. Those pillars made the magic circle in the sky shine super bright now. What does that mean? Who knows? And while she's wondering, Sigiswald notices that Rosemind's distracted, but she brushes it off, saying that she's worried about Hortensia, and if there's any arch scholars who could take her place. Well, probably not, since Roblu pulled some strings to get her that job in the first place. Oh, that's a nasty bit of information, but maybe they can enter the underground archive without a librarian? That's worth testing later, but for now, they deliver the mana, and that's that. but Schwartz and Weiss tell her that Gramps needs mana too. Well, sure, I guess. Solange and Sigiswald give permission, though Sigiswald is shocked just how much mana she's donating to the library. And of course, Rosemind spends her mana on things she cares about, so she goes up to the second floor to give mana to the statue of Mestianora, with all of her adult retainers following behind. But as soon as she touches the book on the statue, her mana flows out, and a new magic circle is burned into her mind like when she learned how to make the divine instruments. That's ominous. And then she feels herself float up into the air, and suddenly, it's black.
Well, that's a wrap on the story, everyone. Rosemind died twice in a library. The end. Okay, I know there's like 5 volumes left, and the runtime on this video definitely gave it away, but she had a new divine instrument magic circle burned into her brain, so you can probably guess what's coming next. Especially since what she was touching.
So, everywhere around her is black, and she's not really sure where she is. But after a moment, she realizes that mana illuminates the space around her, and even better, when she sees the walls, they're a literal wall of books that go up as far as the eye can see. Goddamn, praise Mestianora, am I right? Rosemind races over to grab some of those books and get started reading, only to find out they're not actually real. Yeah, this is basically just wallpaper. Well, she's pissed now, but she doesn't really get a chance to dwell on that for too long because a golden shoemill like Schwartz and Weiss speaks up from behind her. It asks if she's the one who seeks knowledge and tells her to follow. Yeah, it sounds like it's speaking pretty damn fluently, but as she tries to talk to it more, she realizes Schwartz and Weiss are actually better at conversation, as this thing only has like 3 lines of dialogue total. After going down a few flights of stairs, they come to a door with 7 colored face stones on it. Well, she's seen this before, and is pretty damn reluctant to try for fear of getting blasted again. But when she tries to open it, it actually does. Awesome. And on the other side is a translucent barrier. Well, fuck it, I guess. She transverses the fog gate as the shoemill tells her to, but instead of an imposing boss health bar on the other side, she finds herself in the Garden of Beginnings again. Damn, and here she thought she might actually find some books. But no. As Rosemind laments her luck, another voice calls out to her. This time though, it says she's finally back. The ivory tree in the center of the circle slowly transforms into a person, and that's fucking terrifying. Even in Jurgenschmidt, that's not a common sight. Too bad she can't run though, because the exit is nowhere to be seen. But when the figure finishes transforming, he scolds her for being late. Jurgenschmidt's foundation is so dry, only a thin layer of mana covers the ground. Well, hell if she knows what he's talking about, but is this the infamous Gramps we've heard so much about? Now that's a name he hasn't heard in quite some time. But when Rosemind tries to ask him some questions, he flips it around and asks her some. Like, why has her vessel shrunk so much since the last time they met? Yeah, she can't hold everything as she is now. Wait, what's he talking about? It's not like they've met before, right? No, definitely not. But before she can get some actual answers, he looks up to the skylight and asks Anwak, the god of growth, for some help in a very casual tone. Suddenly, some blue light shines down on Rosemind and her body starts to hurt. Like, she starts growing very suddenly to the point that she has to start cutting off her clothes, or else she'll strangle herself in them. Boots and all. Luckily, her high bishop robes are made to grow with her, so she can at least modify those. But damn if this isn't embarrassing as hell.
The scene actually goes into a ton of detail about how painful this is without getting gross. Like, even that little detail about noble hair gel comes back up, because it's tugging on her scalp. Seriously, going forward, I may miss details and there's parts of the story you may interpret differently than I do. It's all the more reason you should be reading this book series yourself and not using my videos as a replacement. There's even the audiobook out. So support the official release, buy the books or the audiobooks. So after she writes herself with a potion, light face stone armor, and fixing her robes to be halfway decent, she confronts the statue dude about seeing her undress. But he simply says that he cannot see her form, just her mana. Wait, what the hell does that mean? He tells her that now that her vessel has grown and she's learned her lesson by coming through the proper route, she should be able to hold more than before. Clearly he has her confused with somebody else, but he tells her to make her stop. Fine. Why not? Then the 7 divine colors shoot out, form into tablets, and make a circle around her. She then recites the words that she learned from the shrines. And then Gramps tells her to pray to the supreme gods for Mestianora's wisdom. Rosemind does just that, and the tablets turn back into a light and shoot up into the sky through a skylight, where a beam of gold light shines down on her. And that's when the fun begins. Suddenly, just about every damn piece of information in the world pours into her brain, like she accidentally just downloaded the internet itself. But if anything catches her eye and she tries to focus on it, there's the risk of aborting the download and ruining the whole process.
Yeah, and you can't just restart this one either. So Gramps tells her to just accept it without thinking for now. That's not really gonna work. She has to organize it all in her brain, as stories about the gods quickly turn into history about the country. That's when she notices something that's pretty damn big, and could actually let Georgine steal Ehrenfest's foundation. Oh damn, well, can't stop and think about it now, since Gramps, as she just learned from this massive info dump being beamed directly into her brain, is actually Yverman, the former god of binding. And he tells her not to think or else she might spill the information and lose it forever. But this process has so much useless information in it, as details about random kings and nobles are all mixed about, and parts are even missing. But it's here that she realizes that the Grutrasite is whatever physical form the Zent gives to the Book of Mestianora. So how will she find what she needs? That's a question for later, as suddenly the beam of knowledge stops. But one question does come to mind now that she has Mestianora's wisdom. Why does it contain so much about nobles, but practically nothing about commoners? Well, you do need a shop and enough mana to be turned into a face stone for your wisdom to be added to Mestianora's when you die. That's why this doesn't really contain anything about commoners, or much even after the Purge, as Mestianora gathers the memories of Zents and Obs. And with that, Rosemine passes out.
Wow, we just had a ton thrown at us all of a sudden. Rosemine met a former god, got Mestianora's wisdom, and now has a Grutrasite of her very own. Well, she needs to get out of here, probably because her retainers are worried sick, and also to tell Sylvester what Georgine is planning. Yeah, basically just screw school because shit got serious. Welcome to the turning point of the entire series.
When Rosemine wakes up, she tells Yverman how displeased she is with the reception. Books were promised, and she got none, and that's on top of the headache and forced age progression. Overall, 2 out of 10, wouldn't recommend again. Yeah, that's a first in his book too. Someone actually pissed off about receiving Mestianora's wisdom. Most people would kill for that shit, but he explains that she received the parts that she was missing before, so she just needs to combine them now. Yeah, no, this is her first time meeting him, but he's in disbelief. He recalls their first encounter, when he broke in from the ceiling and forcefully powered the magic circle that makes Yverman take his humanoid form. That way he could get the book. So how is he mistaking her for this mysterious person when all he perceives is mana? I mean, we learned about how mana can become similar earlier in this book, but that's a temporary process. And them getting the same divine names from the supreme gods is pretty much impossible. And actually, by that account, Rosemine shouldn't have even been able to get her stop in the first place. But hey, since she got it in her first year, she actually dodged a bullet. Yeah, if they were still waiting until their third, she wouldn't have been able to even obtain her divine will. Okay, so, assuming he believes her, he tells her that she must be a child marked by a Weegalib then, but that doesn't really ring a bell. However, the info on that is in the wisdom she just received. So Rosemine pulls out her stop and chants Grutrasite to make an electronic tablet appear. That's the shape she's chosen for her book of Mestianora. That way she can use the search feature. Pretty smart, right?
Well, here it is. We're finally getting to what I alluded to multiple times in this video already. The difference between Rosemine and Dirk. Get your deep lore notebooks ready, because this one's a trip.
We find out that the mark of a Weegalib is a rare occurrence for children with the Devouring. The Devouring has been a pretty hotly contested condition for a while now, because it just seems to be commoners with mana, and that's true. But the question is it an actual illness, or a condition unique in itself from having mana in the first place? But as we saw with Dirk earlier this volume, children with the Devouring are faintly omni-elemental, with a slight affinity for one element based on which country gate they're closest to. In Ehrenfest, that would be the gate associated with wind. The sovereignty is life, as it doesn't have a country gate, by the way. The reason being, Jürgen Schmidt is a massive magic circle for sealing the god of life's power. And by just pure logic there, the center of that is where the life element is. But since kids with the Devouring don't have elemental influence from their parents, as said parents don't have enough mana to even influence their children with elements, they're essentially one-side sweeps. They should be praying to define their own mana through divine protections, but that's not really going to happen with the current system, is it? So when they marry, they take on the mana properties of their partner when mixing entirely. Now, how does that relate to Rosemine? Well, the mark of a Weegalib is a child with the Devouring who skated death multiple times, and has mana clumps in them despite being alive still. Sound familiar? Yeah, those mana clumps she dissolved, that was her mark of a Weegalib. But why has she died then? Well, Ferdinand did so before her clumps were dissolved, basically dyeing the face stones in her, so his influence never faded. Now, it's not a perfect copy, as the dyeing won't ever be as strong as the original, which explains why Rosemine's mana is a pale yellow compared to Ferdinand's being white. So to recap, Rosemine got dyed by Ferdinand, which would normally be a temporary process, but because she refused to die as a child, she had face stone clumps in her body that were actually dyed by Ferdinand when he went looking through her memories, making her solidly omni-elemental like him, but not as strongly so. And why did she survive those deaths in the first place? Mostly because she had memories from another world, and the reasoning to help her survive for as long as she did. This is how you do isekai right. Because Rosemine's literal existence and explanation for why she's so special stems from her unique circumstances.
Did you get all that? There will be a quiz later.
Wait, so this means that Ferdinand was the rude dude who busted in on Yverman? Oh shit, that means he's got part of a Grutricite, because hers is missing the chunks that he has. Mostly about magic, by the way. Big surprise. You want to know why Ferdinand knows so goddamn much? It's because of that. Every little detail of why Ferdinand knows some random piece of trivia about magic, like that the divine instruments can be used as weapons, or what that selection circle for the Zent even was in the Bible, and hell, how Detlin didn't actually activate it. Yeah, all that random stuff that we took for granted because he's Ferdinand, so of course he would know it. It's because he's been sitting on a Grutricite this whole time. So that does beg the question, why didn't he just become Zent? And that answer's pretty obvious, because based on how much is missing from Rosemine's Grutricite, he only has about 30 to 40%. Okay, so before Rosemine heads out, she asks if there's anything someone in her situation should know. You know, someone with this whole died child with the mark of a Weegalebe crap. I mean, hell if Yverman knows. This situation was a long shot to even happen once, so assuming someone like her actually makes it to adulthood, he expects it wouldn't be any different than a child died by their parents. Ferdinand's mana is the basis for hers now, but it will still change after she marries. Cool. But Yverman drops the nugget that it was a man named Quinta who died her. Well, no, she's already figured it out. It was Ferdinand. So who the hell's this Quinta? After she comes closer, introducing us to the new running gag of her tripping constantly due to not being used to her new height, he confirms that Ferdinand's true name is Quinta, in the same way that hers is mine. So Yverman gives her one last order before he turns back into a tree. Kill Ferdinand and take his face stone so she can complete her book and become Zent, as Jurgenschmidt doesn't have much time left. Not that she will, because, well, she only got it to save him in the first place.
Would you believe that we're not even halfway through this book yet? We had a ton of revelations just dropped on us, from what makes Rosemine so special to why Ferdinand knows so much. And now she's supposedly fated to kill him to finish her book and become Zent? Where the hell are we going from here? Well, let's find out. Her fourth year's only just begun after all, right?
The path from the top of the altar in the farthest hall is now open, so Rosemine exits the way she did during her divine protection ceremony. It's dark, but she's not exactly sure how late it is. I mean, it could be sometime after dinner, or even the middle of the night. So Rosemine sends an ordinance off to Lysaletta to ask the royal family to open the farthest hall so she can leave. Otherwise, she'd be stuck there until morning, but also bring a full body cloak for her, one big enough for an adult specifically. And now it's time to play the waiting game. So she busts out her stop and chants the magic word for her Grutricite to appear. Then she doom scrolls for the information she saw when she was getting the book about stealing the foundation. That was important as hell, and something she needed to tell Sylvester about to protect Ehrenfest. And that's when she spots it. Yeah, suddenly Georgine's plan comes into focus. Their purge last winter bought them some time, but she's seriously stressing if she made it or not. All she can really do to pass the time is read up on foundations for hints while she waits. But she also recognizes that this is the Grutricite that the royals were looking for, so she can't exactly wave it around all willy-nilly. That's when a group of people finally enter the hall. Sigiswald, Hildebrand, Lysaletta, Cornelius, Matthias, and Gresha. Lysaletta races over to put the cloak on Rosemine, while she dismisses the Grutricite and takes Cornelius' arm for stability. Hildebrand is shocked by how much taller she is than him now, but she explains that Yverman had Amwaks bless her to grow. Cool. She briefly greets Sigiswald, but just tells him to wait until the Archduke conference to talk about what happened. So with that, they race back to the dorm where she finds it completely empty.
Oh, never mind. I guess she just missed her fourth year. Told you it'd blow your expectations.
Yeah, turns out it's almost spring. The graduation ceremony wrapped up and everyone was worried sick about her. Well, not Hartmut. He kept evangelizing about just how much her mana and body were growing. Absolutely gross. But nonetheless, everyone was still worried about her. She asks for food and rest for now, but tomorrow, she needs to head home to Ehrenfest, even though they're willing to give her a few days. So, they should probably send word now. There's a heartfelt moment between Cornelius and her where he tells her how worried he was, and then tries to pat her on the head only to realize how much taller she's gotten. But then she reaches out and makes him do it anyway, earning a remark that she needs to catch up on her growth on the inside now. But back in her room, Rosemine realizes just how big she's gotten. Yeah, she's about as tall as Gresha now, but still a bit shorter than Lieseletta. They ask her what the hell happened while changing her clothes, and she shredded the ones underneath her High Bishop robes. But she just tells them the same story because that's what literally happened. Looks like she'll have to wear her High Bishop robes for a while, right? Well, no. Turns out Brunhilde left all of her outfits in the dorm for her because they knew Rosemine was growing from Hartmut's ravings. Still gross. But hey, at least she has clothes now, though they are gonna have to do a fitting and emergency clothes order back home, since she's still due to be adopted at the end of the Archduke conference. She can't exactly go wearing her retainer's clothes either. Besides, these are all for winter. For the first time since her growth, Rosemine sees herself in a mirror and is absolutely shocked by how beautiful she's gotten. Though with how she acts, she'll be lumped in with Angelica as a waste of her beauty at this rate. So while she eats, she hears about what she missed this term. Hartmut and Daniel took the Klausenberg documents and transcribed them for her. The Fey paper was delivered to Ferdinand during the Interduchy tournament. Matthias struggled for a partner to escort for his graduation since he didn't find anybody before. Also lacked a lady or family to introduce them to. Plus he's the son of a criminal, so pickings were pretty slim anyway. Eventually Ottilie came to escort him out of kindness. That was nice of her. But Gresha shows zero sympathy here, as he should have done something about it before the last minute. Besides, Matthias never really had any intention to find a partner since he's moving with her to the Sovereignty, though this does ring some alarm bells for Lorenz.
Yeah, her underage retainers are gonna need to figure out their plans going forward, especially her name-sworn ones.
The next morning, they head back to Ehrenfest, where the entire Archducal family is there to greet her. Shocks all around because she's grown a ton, but she cuts right to the chase and addresses Sylvester first, saying she needs to talk with him because she knows what Georgine's plan is, telling him that this does actually relate to the Foundation, so she'll need to tell him alone and to summon her when he wants to, but he says right now will do. After all, that sounds pretty damn important, so he tells Bonifatius to escort her to his office while he races off first. Bonifatius is stoked, of course, but Wilfried, Melchior, and Charlotte are around too, and we get their reactions to Rosemine as well. Wilfried talks about how Hartmut wouldn't shut up about her growth, but he also wasn't wrong. However, he can tell that she still hasn't matured in the slightest on the inside, and as it turns out, Wilfried is still a decent amount taller than she is. But what about Charlotte? Rosemine has finally reclaimed her pride as a big sister for once. Not by much, but still. As for Melchior, he's more moved that Hartmut was right about Rosemine being invited by Mestianora to the world of the gods, and that she's grown as a result. Well, he wasn't completely wrong, but still. Kind of annoying how smug Hartmut is acting in this scene, but as she tries to walk and stumbles due to her new height, Bonifatius steps up and Princess carries her to Sylvester's office. That seems pretty extreme and pushing the bounds of acceptable, but from Bonifatius' perspective, her being bigger means he's actually much less likely to hurt her. Yeah, she was so small and light before, he could barely tell how much strength he was using.
So I skipped Daniel joking about Rosemine's weight in Volume 5 because wasn't really that important, but for Bonifatius' case, it's actually 100% sincere. Dude could have accidentally killed her multiple times because he's constantly strengthening his body through magic, and he couldn't tell how hard he was squeezing. In Sylvester's office, they clear everyone out and get down to business. Or somewhat. She has to walk to his desk still, and trips over her own feet, shattering the serious mood when everyone leaves. And then there's the fact that her high beast is absolutely hilarious with an adult-sized woman crammed inside. So, that doesn't really help. But when she sits down, they can finally chat. So what's this about her knowing Georgine's plan to steal their foundation? She doesn't have concrete evidence or a smoking gun, but her actions line up with what she read in her research, and this all relates to the theft of their Bible last year. Really? Yeah, because she reveals that the location to the Duchy's foundation is below the temple. In fact, every Duchy's foundation is there. Even Sylvester didn't know that, since everyone just assumes it's under the castle. Now that doesn't mean someone can just waltz right in, there's no physical door to it, but the reason everyone assumed it was under the castle is because the entrance is in the Archduke's chambers. But there's a magic tool that Archdukes pass down that let their heirs teleport into the foundation. That's the key to it. Now that's been a huge pain for people trying to steal foundations in the past, or when an Archduke dies unexpectedly, the next one in line has to tear the castle apart looking for the foundation key, and it usually doesn't actually look like a key.
because it can look like anything. There is a second key that allows one to enter the foundation through a hidden path in the temple, because the first Zhent served as a high bishop. Remember? He put foundations under the temple so prayers would flow into them and reach the gods easier. However, the Zhent also creates the divine instruments and Bible along with those foundations, basically making the Bible an instruction manual on how to obtain the Book of Mestianora. Not directly, but so you know the ceremonies to get one. Now, many Oabs used to be high bishops too. In fact, that was pretty damn normal. Archduke candidates served as high bishops to earn protections and improve their mana before taking the role of Archduke. So the Bible keys were actually a failsafe in case the Oab died before passing on his. However, that fell out of favor when other candidates realized they could build factions and treat the heir as a figurehead, so it eventually became unpopular to send heirs to the temple. In fact, they straight up refused, even if it did improve their mana. So, what's the point in this? The Bible key is the backup to get into the foundation through the temple, not the Bible itself, as those are interchangeable. The keys are not, however. They're unique to the duchy they're from. Those letters that Georgine exchanged with Bezewansk? Yeah, that was probably how she found out. But why didn't she do this sooner, since she was close to Bezewansk before she even left? Well, simple. She probably didn't learn until Rosmine took over the role as High Bishop, meaning it was probably coded in that last set of letters they found in Part 3, and that Sylvester himself gave her during her visit. But wait, doesn't Rosmine have the key? Well, it's in the temple right now, basically just sitting in a barely guarded room that someone already broke into once. What this means is Georgine is already targeting that entrance to the foundation, not the one in the castle.
I didn't mention this in Part 4, Volume 9 because I didn't realize that detail was so important. Hell, this volume wasn't even out yet. Missed that by a month. But there's actually a carving of Mestianora in the temple book room on a bookshelf. That's a keyhole, and he uses the Bible's key to access the foundation. Yeah, see what I mean? Even a little detail like that I glossed over as cute world building turned out to be pretty damn important to the plot.
So now they know what to expect and need to rethink their defense. Basically, don't just put knights in the temple, but keep them close by and include the temple in their plan. But Sylvester's already pretty confident. If Georgine is making her move, she'll do so before spring prayer. Why is he so sure? Because they've already crippled her support base with the purge. That means she's gonna need to act before Ferdinand's Starbind. Otherwise, he'll interfere with her scheme. But for the first time, Sylvester is stoked to be ahead of his sister in terms of plotting. So with that, they call their meeting to a close. But before she can leave, Sylvester asks where she got this information. She's vague and simply asks him where he thinks she got it from. And that's all the answer he really needs. But she clarifies she only got about 70%. And some of the crucial parts are missing. Her plan for now, though, is to go to the temple and check on the key, because she's not too sure about it. Remember, the mana was swapped out of the key during the Bible incident, and Rosmine wasn't super familiar with it in the first place, so she needs to be more thorough in her examination. In her bedroom, she informs her retainers that she'll be heading to the temple, but Lieseletta wants her back in the castle tomorrow for a fitting. Why's that? Because she needs clothes so badly, they're borrowing Elvira, Florencia, and Charlotte's personal seamstresses to help the Gilberta Company. It's not like there's much time either, since the conference is like a month away, so clothes are a priority. Brunhilde's hand-me-downs will work for now, but they're not befitting a future princess's status, nor do they match her specific style, even if they do incorporate her trends. With that, she gets her retainers working on their respective tasks. The scholars will follow her, the usual knights will go to the temple, while the rest should expect summons from Bonifatius and Karstedt with new orders, and Bertilda will summon Brunhilde so Rosmine can order a wedding gift for her, all while Gresha gets her personnel in order. At the temple, she gets the shocked expression she's used to by now, but rather than just plain surprise, these are like her temple personnel have just witnessed a miracle. God damn it, her mood got to them too. So what's the purpose of her trip? Well, she needs to check on the Bible key today, but as Damiel and Angelica circled the lower city gates to make sure no one wearing silver cloth came through. Matthias wants to check out Gerlach since Bonifatius set up some traps in case Krausen came back to retrieve some magic tools. So she fires off an ordnance to Bonifatius and he says he'll go check with Matthias personally. Sounds like he's pretty busy, but if he wants to go, sure. I guess he actually knows where the traps are and won't trigger them. Thus, Judith switches out with Matthias as a guard. While that's going down, Fran returns with the Bible key and she takes it into her hidden room to get a closer look. She whips out the Grutrosite and looks up the relevant information. Below the larger registration face stone is a smaller one that's the same color as the duchy it belongs to signify which foundation it can access. And lo and behold, the one on the key in her possession is light violet, not the Ochre of Ehrenfest. Yeah, turns out they switched out Ehrenfest's Bible key with Arnsbach, meaning Georgine does have access to their foundation. While the keys can access any Bible as long as they're registered to the same person, the keys themselves were made with magic. Why is that? Because when the foundation needs remade or destroyed, the Zent would handle that process. But the physical Bible and divine instruments were just given to the new Ob. The key couldn't though, because it belongs to a foundation that no longer exists. The Bibles are basically just textbooks for religious ceremonies needed to obtain a Book of Mestianora with a Shtop anyway, which is far more convenient than the Bibles themselves.
Yeah, you better get used to these little lore dumps coming out of nowhere because Rosemind now has access to the spark notes of this world. I don't even know if that tracks anymore.
So wait, doesn't that mean that Arnsbach's foundation is vulnerable too? Yeah, it is. But it was a pretty safe bet because this information isn't too widely known. However, this does show that Georgine doesn't care about Arnsbach and is solely focused on Ehrenfest's foundation. In fact, she may be looking to actually destroy the duchy rather than rule it, which means just draining the foundation of mana and letting it crumble. That's terrifying, also normally forbidden, but when the current Zent doesn't have a Grutricite to hold her to account, this could be pretty bad. Yeah, Rosemind's certain they need a proper Zent for the country more than ever now. I mean, she does have a Book of Mestianora, so she could just die Jürgen Schmidt's foundation and stop Georgine pretty easily. But she doesn't exactly have a completed book, and thus lacks the magic circles necessary to do everything she would need to. Which means either killing Ferdinand, or getting access to the finished version in the Underground Archive, neither of which are doable right now, so really, her only option is capturing Georgine. So with that, she has to report back to Sylvester. Unfortunately, she won't be able to meet with him until after dinner the next day, so thus, she returns to the castle to wait, agonizing over the information she just learned. Though her retainers are happy to see her back so soon, they reviewed the designs for her outfits as well as the cloth, so that way they can get the orders placed as soon as the fitting is done the next day. And that schedule's looking pretty damn packed, as it's not just dresses, but underwear, shoes, and everything else, honestly. Yeah, that's gonna be a fucking nightmare. But hey, they can repurpose a lot by adding lace and using some of the Arnsbach cloth to modify Brunhilde's clothes to be even fancier. That'll save some time. But this was a poor distraction for her worrying about the impending Foundation attack. And that night, she barely slept. The next day, she meets with all the seamstresses for the fitting, and Tully's able to come to the castle now that she's come of age. Awesome, because that actually manages to brighten her mood. In fact, Tully's gonna be doing the actual measuring. And I mean, the excuse for why she's even there is her hairpins need to match these new designs. Double awesome. And this does give them a brief moment to talk. Obviously her growth comes up, but she is still a bit shorter than Tully, which makes sense. She is younger than her. But while she's fussing over her height, Tully mentions how worried she was about her since they were told to put a halt on all orders for Rosemind over winter. This is when Rosemind snaps back to her senses and makes her resolve known. She tells Tully that she will protect her, no matter what happens, because she knows the real danger is right around the corner. But once the measuring is done, they were finally able to discuss designs and such, which took the rest of the day.
So things seem pretty lax in Ehrenfest, weirdly enough, but that's mostly because these preparations are going on behind the scenes. It's only been like 2 days since she got back, so most people aren't even aware that she's returned. The real war prep starts now.
Finally, it's time to meet with Sylvester, where she can tell him what she learned. That their key was swapped with Arnsbach's, but Rosemind doesn't really see why Georgine did that since it leaves Arnsbach open to attack too. But Sylvester knows how his sister thinks. Basically, she can just pin this on Ehrenfest if it's discovered, by saying they were targeting Arnsbach first, with Ferdinand bringing chaos, and thus they were justified in a preemptive attack. So, this is serious. But they don't know when her plan's gonna kick off anyway. So what are they gonna do in the meantime? Prepare their defenses, but Rosemind needs to remember her priorities. She's still due to be adopted soon, so she needs to focus on her preparations rather than worrying about Ehrenfest. And I mean, if she's that worried, she can make some magic tools and rejuvenation potions, but leave Ehrenfest to Sylvester. That's literally his job. Hell, even if she got a completed Grutricite in time to do something to help, that would mean that Sylvester is a failure of an Ob for having to rely on a Zent to protect his foundation, but her reasoning is flawed in the first place by wanting to help with the king's power. The Zent exists for the whole country, including Arnsbach. She can't prioritize Ehrenfest over them, so does she really have what it takes to be one? And the answer is no. She recognizes that she can't value the whole country equally, and would rather just say screw the royals because, well, they've done her no favors, which leads to Sylvester telling her not to rush into this adoption to solve this issue. He tells her to make it clear at the Archduke conference that she doesn't want this job, and that the royals are forcing her into it, so she should probably take a page out of his book and just shove work off onto others so she doesn't get buried in it too. Why? Because he knows things won't go smoothly if she becomes Zend. For one, the top-ranking duchies won't accept her rule. They're gonna try and use her for their own ends anyway. The real point he's making is, he's pissed that the royals are forcing a former commoner who has zero desire to rule to take the throne and fix their messes. As far as he's concerned, she should be staying in the temple and making books with her lower city friends.
On first reading, this kinda sounds cruel and uncharacteristically classist to Sylvester, but that's not actually what he's saying at all. He's not looking down on Rosemine in this scene, he's lamenting the fact that the people in power of this country have all been using her to solve their problems. They're relying on her way too much, and he's powerless to stop it. This is the underlying reason why Sylvester just kinda lets Rosemine do what she wants, and doesn't really force her to do much of anything. It's because he feels like he's already taken so much away from her with his original adoption. It's some subtle characterization that really informs a lot about his perspective.
Sylvester has no love for the royals' attitude lately, as they pretty much called him irresponsible for doing a purge in the first place, which is fucking rich coming from them. So he's of the mind that Rosemine should just slam the book down and tell them to go solve their own issues with some choice words. Yeah, that would feel great, but she couldn't do that for obvious reasons. So what is the plan if they can't use her becoming Zent to handle Georgine? Well, Sylvester does have an option, one that's been sitting on the table for over a year. He contacts Ferdinand like a goddamn sleeper agent, tells him to off Georgine. That's why he went to Arnsbach in the first place, and even told Sylvester to send word when he wants it done. Goddamn, that's cold. But it would require throwing away Ehrenfest's association with him, and neither Sylvester nor Rosemine could bear that. There are still other options they can do, but they can't act until Georgine makes her move first. So they'll have to bolster their defenses until then. And thus they hatch some plans like setting up guards, traps, and even a teleportation circle at the Foundation entrance in the temple. One that'll teleport Georgine to the Ivory Tower as soon as she touches it. Sylvester can do that, and even have it target those who aren't registered as Ehrenfest citizens. That'll work, because she'll have to remove the silver cloth to even enter the Foundation anyway. Rosemine suggests letting her make the physical circle though, keeping that it'll be with Invisible Ink's secret, so that way he can just activate it himself later. In the meantime, they'll practice evacuation drills and make sure the commoners know what to do. But also, since the research and materials are available, she could just make her own combat versions of Schwartz and Weiss for the temple to keep it safe.
Oh, this is gonna be her new shtick, isn't it?
Basically, they wouldn't be able to talk, and her thought was to have them guide Georgine to the teleportation circle, but that would never work. Like, who would trust some random shoe mills in enemy territory, right? But she could make some attack-focused ones that can be charged by archnobles to fight for a few minutes to protect the temple. Sounds like a decent idea, but as for where they'll attack from, Kerlock seems like the most likely place. But Matthias and Bonifatius found that their traps hadn't been disturbed, so it's likely they're not invading just yet. I mean, the snow hasn't even fully melted, which means they have time to prepare. The Archducal family retainers can brew potions. Hell, make the knights in attendance do that too, since they know how to make the basic one from classes. And then the scholars can focus on magic tools for war. The younger generation can even consult the older generations familiar with treasure-stealing Ditter, and also rely on Ferdinand's notes. Of course, since you know, that's what Ditter is, mock war. The tools from Rosemine's third-year match with Dunkelfelger should actually work on the silver cloth, as they don't really do damage, but irritate the enemy. They could even have the commoners throw literal shit on the nobles to get them to remove their silver cloth. Gross, but effective.
All is fair in love and war, I guess, but we got the major strategies hammered out. Will they be effective? We'll have to see.
As soon as she leaves Sylvester's office, Hartmut is there with a smile. Why's that? He's awaiting her orders. So she summons her retainers to her library to brew. Pretty much all of them. Her med and lay nobles will go to the temple to make simple magic tools and potions, while her arch nobles will handle the bigger brews like the shoe mills. And that will let Damiel and Felina stay in contact with Melchior, but spring prayer prep is underway. Won't Hartmut have to go for that? Well, no. He's already passed off his high priest duties to one of Melchior's retainers, so he and Rosemine are free from doing spring prayer owing to her absence. But for the Shumills, well, it turns out that Hersher flipped her shit when Rosemine fell ill over the semester and demanded to see her for ingredients even though she was supposed to be bedridden. Yeah, she's that research obsessed. She wouldn't leave the dorm without them, so they pretty much had to tell her what happened, and she agreed to keep their secret as long as she got the ingredients. That's good, and thus she was able to brew a Shumill over winter. Well, needing Ferdinand's help at the tournament to finish, of course, because she lacked the elements and mana, but it's for searching documents in Rosemine's library. Finally, and any name she tries to think of is rejected pretty much immediately, because Lieseleda named it, of course, and everyone's already used to that name. So, we're introduced to Ardred officially, the first in what's soon to be a long line of Shumill creations. So she explains what they're gonna make, and outlines the issues Sylvester foresaw with mana. But no problem there. Hartmut and Clarissa have ideas to handle that, but there is a certain resource she wants to consult first. She bails on over to her hidden room and checks her Grucher site, of course, but she hits a pretty big wall right away, one that's already come up before, maybe not for her, but people. She doesn't know what Schwartz and Weiss's actual names are, and thus can't do any searching for them, but one thing is definitely for sure. The gaps she's finding are in magic tools, which makes it pretty damn clear what Ferdinand was interested in most. Thinking about him makes her look to her praise-filled magic tool, but as she goes to reach for it, she remembers the bag was double layered, and there was definitely something inside. Curiosity wins out, now of all times, and she cuts it open and finds a face stone wrapped in a note. She reads the note first because, well, it's written text, she has to read it, and finds out that this is the namestone of a man called Quinta. And until Ferdinand comes to retrieve it, he wants her to leave it be in a hidden room, and absolutely do not touch it. So why didn't Ferdinand just give it back to this Quinta guy before he left? Oh right, Quinta is Ferdinand. Oh shit, this is Ferdinand's namestone.
So people were wondering back in Volume 3 who Ferdinand gave his name to, and Sylvester kept popping up there. But no, he subtly gave it to Rosemine without her even realizing he did, and then didn't even tell her whose name it actually was. The simple fact that she knows it's his is such a coincidence it's damn near comical, but this is how he kept his name safe from Detlind and Georgine. So then the next big question is this: why did Ferdinand even make a namestone in the first place? Well, we'll get that answer in a later volume.
Yeah, this is a huge burden, having the name of her mentor just chilling here when she's so worried about him in the first place. But this simple gesture goes to show just how much he trusts Rosemine. He never would have done this back in part 3 or even early part 4, so she resolves to keep it safe in her hidden room. The next while is spent making Shumills, magic tools, running evacuation drills, and otherwise preparing for war. In the end, they made 3 Shumills to guard the temple, but their mana usage is so high, it takes an Archnoble to supply them for only a few minutes of activity, so they won't be active all the time, but they will recognize the guards with face stones as their masters and not hurt them. So these are definitely emergency measures for the temple. But now the winter is over, spring baptisms are around the corner, and Rosemine's not taking no for an answer on this batch. This'll be her last baptism ceremony as the High Bishop of Arenfest, and one that's really damn important to her, because it's Camille's. And there is absolutely no restraint in how big she's gonna make this blessing, because she can pretty much just use the excuse that this is her last chance to bless the commoners before leaving Arenfest. Smooth. Felina will be joining this ceremony too as an apprentice blue robe, and she's borrowing Mine's ceremonial robes from part 2, which actually makes her sort of happy, since she doesn't really associate herself with her house anymore. She feels much better wearing the crest of her protector, but the actual walk to the chapel with Fran is pretty damn touching, as Rosemine's finally hit with the fact that this is her final ceremony. But Fran invites her to see just how much the temple has changed. Nobles now visit without reservations, even if it's for their own reasons. The commoners of the lower city take ceremonies that much more seriously, and the Archduke's blood children are actually involved in the temple. Hell, the orphanage has even produced its own nobles now. The future is pretty damn bright, and it's all because of the changes she's made. So he sees her off to the chapel with a calm smile, where she takes Hartmut's hand onto the stage once more. And as she looks out on the crowd, she sees the changes that Fran mentioned for herself. But right now, Camille is the most important to her. And when she finds him, she sees just how big he's actually gotten. Looking a lot like their dad, but also wearing dyed cloth from their mom. That way he can emphasize their connection to Rosemine. But she begins the ceremony and fires off a massive blessing. only slightly smaller than the one she gave Thule. But as the kids leave, she sees her family standing on the other side of the door, with Lutz too for some reason. Oh right, she doesn't know he's engaged to Thule. But Camille is a bit embarrassed they're literally waiting at the door. But that's not the only reason they came. I mean, it's a big day, but Thule told them something pretty unbelievable, and they just had to see it for themselves. Yeah, Rosemine's growth. So you can see they're all not just shocked, but visibly happy for her. And you would think that this exchange would make her pretty happy, but it actually makes her feel lonely. Because when she moves to the sovereignty, that'll put an end to even these little interactions. But once they leave the chapel after the ceremony, her knights are waiting. Sylvester is holding a meeting for the archducal family with select retainers being allowed to join. That way they can brief everyone on their roles in Ehrenfest defense, since they're expecting things to pop off around Spring Prayer, which is obviously coming. We already know that. So she and Melchior send out their orders for some knights to stay behind at the temple, while they both head back to the castle.
Wow, Camille is officially old enough to be recognized as a citizen of Ehrenfest. But at the same time, she's gonna miss out celebrating with her family. At this point, Rosemine's mindset is this. She's feeling like she's lost her connection to her family entirely. Especially once she becomes a princess, she's not gonna be able to meet with them or talk to them anymore. So keep that in mind going forward.
Back at the castle, she got an update on how things went while she was at the temple. Roderick's come a long way with Clarissa drilling him. Apparently his mana has improved enough through compression that she expects him to hold his own in brewing for Rosemine. Judith got a crash course in making her own magic tools in her ranged defensive style, and there's been a definite improvement in pretty much everyone. As for the upcoming meeting, Otillie won't be coming because Lisaletta is due to become Rosemine's head attendant in the Sovereignty. Her chambers are pretty much packed and ready for the royal order telling her to come, and she's even getting ready to close her hidden room in the temple too. So yeah, there's a definite feeling of finality in the air. But at the meeting itself, Sylvester makes sure Rosemine and Melchior left knights at the temple, which they did. Nicholas is even taking watch too, now that he's finished his first year in the academy as an apprentice knight. While she was absent over winter, he cozied on up to Melchior for a new protector, so the kid's not stuck between a rock and a hard place anymore, trying to win over Cornelius. That kicks off the meeting proper, where Sylvester recaps what they know and their defensive plans. Karstedt will protect the city as a whole, while Bonifatius will lead the charge to fend off invaders. Florencia and Charlotte head the castle, while Wilfried takes the nobles' quarter. That leaves Melchior to watch the temple. Seems kinda dangerous, but sure, he's gonna be the High Bishop. But what about Rosemine? They still don't know when she's gonna leave, so if this happens before she moves, she can just fill in the gaps. But Charlotte's pretty surprised by this news, as she'll be expected to fight too. But Sylvester lays it out, that if she's gunning for Ob, she'll need to dirty her hands when the Foundation is on the line. And that's probably yet another reason why men are prioritized for Archduke candidates. Because women don't get the combat training unless they take the Knight's course, their hands are pretty full trying to learn the intricacies of socializing in the female hierarchy. On the bright side, all this outside enemy crap has actually managed to unify Ehrenfest, as the older generations teach the younger ones about treasure-stealing dinner tactics. But as they go over this plan, a pretty big piece of world building that's been hanging on for about 23 volumes suddenly smacks Rosemine in the head, as she hears Ferdinand yell her name.
Alright. That whole Lutz getting visions of mine being attacked by a Trombe back in part 2 never really got explained, did it? Well, here it is, coming back in part 5.
So she's engulfed in a rainbow light, and suddenly finds herself in a mana replenishment hall. No one's around anymore, except Letizia and Ferdinand randomly, where she sees him holding his chest while Letizia shows concern. Dude's coughing, so something's seriously wrong. Okay, so she yells his name and tries to reach out to touch him, but she can't actually interact. It's like she's watching TV or something. That's when Ferdinand takes the cage from around his belt with his namestones and hands it over to Letizia. He tells her to give it to Eustace with the instructions for him to go. Looks like she understood because she bails right on out of the replenishment hall. But as Ferdinand struggles to breathe after collapsing onto the ground, the charms Rosemine gave him activate with rainbow light, keeping him alive for now. And that's somewhat of a relief, though still terrifying. That's when Det Lind strolls in wearing silver cloth. She's not just there to taunt him or definitely not help, as she says that Leonzio told her the poison should have killed him instantly. Her plan was to just stumble upon his face stone and blame Letizia for the murder. But it looks like Ferdinand's preparedness actually ruined her schemes. Yet again, she drops the bombshell that she promised to return Lanzanov's face stone to Leonzio, so she full-on tramples Ferdinand's past in front of him and says that as a future Zent, she couldn't be married to someone who was such a failure, he wasn't even deemed worthy to die. But Ferdinand simply responds that she is an Ob, so thus she can't become Zent. However, here's the kicker. Detlin didn't actually die Arnsbach's foundation. Yeah, Georgine actually made her sister do it in secret. She'll return her sister and brother-in-law, who is also her half-brother, to the Archducal family and make him the Ob instead. Basically, she's gonna give Arnsbach plenty of Archduke candidates from her extended family. Her mother made all the preparations after all. Though, no clue why Georgine wants Ehrenfest of all places. But Detlind honestly doesn't care. As long as Ferdinand is out of the picture, their plan will go smoothly. So Detlind takes this chance to try and finish Ferdinand off, but he throws some magic tools at her in a last-ditch effort. Too bad those don't do crap because of that stupid silver cloth. So she gets close and blows even more poison in his face that puts him down for the count essentially. Not outright killing him, mind you, but now he's fully paralyzed. She then slaps some stop-sealing handcuffs on him and drags him over to the replenishment magic circle to offer mana until he dies. Surely her sister will appreciate that. And when Detlind does leave, Ferdinand's just laying there motionless.
So I can't really understate just how awful Detlind is in this scene. She's mostly been a bumbling idiot who's just been annoying so far, but this scene cements her as an absolute piece of garbage. One you're gonna hate for the rest of this series.
Rosemind snaps back to reality finally, and everyone's looking at her in absolute shock. They didn't see what happened, but she was suddenly glowing with rainbow color and froze in place. She simply says that they don't have time and that Ferdinand needs their help. So she tries to race out of his office, but he stops her then and there. And that calms her down enough that she realizes an explanation is probably in order. So she tells them what she saw, and that means that Georgine is making her move. Was that really Sylvester's takeaway though? Well, basically. Here's what sucks. They recognize that Ferdinand is basically a dead man at this point. He's poisoned in a replenishment hall in another duchy, being drained of his mana. There's absolutely no way they can save him in time, even if she got to Arnsbach. Hell, he'd die before she even got into the duchy. As Sylvester and Bonifatius try to talk some sense into her, she strokes the Bible key still in her possession. Oh hey, that's an idea. If Georgine is aiming to steal Ehrenfest's foundation through the temple, why can't they do that too? So she lays out her stance on the issue. She only accepted this adoption to save Ferdinand in the first place. If he's dead, she couldn't care less what happens to the country at that point. In Rosemind's mind, the hierarchy goes books, family, Ehrenfest, and then Jürgen Schmidt down at the bottom. Though an unlikely ally actually backs her up in Wilfried, where he says they didn't plan on her being in their defense anyway, so just let her go with her guard knights. Okay, but that's still not enough. They would need an actual strike force to attack a greater duchy. You can't just waltz in with a small group of people. But Rosemind's actually got a plan for that too. Why not invite Dunkelfelger to a game of True Ditter? They love that shit, right? Great plan, but they don't have enough evidence to launch an attack on Arnsbach. Neither the sovereignty nor the greater duchies would support them. So she blurts out what she learned during that out-of-body experience. That Arnsbach is collaborating with Lanzanov to overthrow the Zent. Detlind isn't going to cooperate with the current royal family. She just wants to take the Gruchasite for herself and make Leonzio her consort. Why is that a big deal? Well, simply put, Ehrenfest of all duchies knows better than to work with a foreign entity to claim the throne. That's literally how they came into existence in the first place.
Oh hey, that wasn't just world building, but a goddamn lesson that gave Ehrenfest a reason to intervene in this coup.
Okay, that's a good excuse, but will it be enough to convince Dunkelfelger to join them? Let's find out. Smash cut to the Watermere for talking with other Obs where they get Ob Dunkelfelger on the line. He's really surprised to see Rosemind there next to Sylvester, but she extends the offer for True Ditter after going into the threat facing Jürgen Schmidt. The game is simple. Dunkelfelger will assist the sovereignty and invade Arnsbach while Ehrenfest protects its own foundation. But as enticing as this offer is, because Ob Dunkelfelger is a Ditter maniac too, he's not stupid enough to throw his duchy into the firing lines without a good reason. So she drops the tactical nuke that Ferdinand is currently dying in Arnsbach due to an assassination attempt on his life, and then heavily implies that this is pretty much Dunkelfelger's fault. He wouldn't have been there in the first place without their meddling. And that's true, the Yob even recognizes that, and she didn't want to use that logic, but if there's no other choice, she'll even resort to blackmail. I mean, as a last resort, mind you. That's pretty much a Ferdinand tactic though. And the Yob immediately picks up on what she's dropping, and is eager to right the wrongs his duchy did to Ehrenfest and Ferdinand. So, Dunkelfelger is on board, but what's her actual plan? She needs Dunkelfelger to distract Arnsbach's knights while she steals the foundation. Bold move to take the strongest knights in the country and make them a mere diversion. But she does make it clear, she only wants to save Ferdinand. If Ob Dunkelfelger wants Arnsbach's foundation afterwards, he's more than welcome to it. But he declines since, they're traitors and all. Now the only thing left is how quickly they can be ready. And that's essentially as soon as he asks for volunteers. Yeah, Dunkelfelger is pretty much ready to rock whenever, at all times. But as for the plan of attack, they'll strike at night to minimize commoner casualties. She thinks it'll take about a bell to pinpoint the foundation, but who knows how long to actually rescue Ferdinand, since they don't know where the mana replenishment hall is. Maybe she could ask Aurelia. She's from there, right? But that's a question for later. She warns the Ob about Lanzanov's weapons and poison, but in turn, she gets some warnings herself. True Ditter is rarely played for a reason. New Obs who take a duchy by force have their work cut out for them, by subduing the noble population, moving personnel, and reorganizing the duchy to even be presentable. So he's interested to see how she's gonna pull this off. All that's left is where are they gonna meet? At Arnsbach's border gate? Oh no, she tells Dunkelfelger to meet at their country gate. Wait, does this mean? Oh yeah, she gives off Dunkelfelger a knowing smile. This just got interesting, because he pieced together that she has the Grutrasite from that information alone.
Damn, talk about some hardcore express negotiations. But with that, she secured the strongest ally she could want. All that's left is their assault on Arnsbach.
So with that, it's about informing the royals of their plans and getting her retainers mobilized. But Sylvester shoots her down. She's already done enough, and she still has a big night ahead of her, so let him take care of the back end crap. However, before she can leave, an ordnance flies in stating that Eckhart and Eustace are at the Royal Academy dorm's tea party room requesting a meeting. So that's what Ferdinand's go meant, and their presence there means Rosemine was right, as much as Sylvester hoped that she wasn't. So she decides to head to her library and wait while Sylvester contacts the royal family and goes to meet Eckhart and Eustace, telling him to send them her way when they get back. The epilogue then picks up from Letizia's perspective. We find out that Det Lind raced back during the Interduchy tournament to open the border gate for Lanzanov a whole season early, since they usually arrive after the Archduke Conference. Not this time, however. Roswitha, Letizia's head attendant originally from Druanchel, and Sergius's mother by the way, shares in Letizia's sentiment that Lanzanov should pretty much just fuck off. Basically, Det Lind's attachment to Leonzio is too much, and Ferdinand can't really stop her rampages as he's from another duchy, and not yet married into Arnsbach. We find out that most of the nobles aligned with Letizia just assume that Georgine's not used to a leading role, so she's just letting Det Lind learn from her mistakes. But we, the audience, know they're underestimating her. While they had hoped that Strahl would be able to get Lanzanov to leave before Det Lind arrived, people loyal to her sent word, and she actually left the Interduchy tournament early to go open the gate. Thus, Lanzanov arrived a whole season early. They brought a ton of luggage this time too, mostly under the guise of gifts for the king. Later, talking about spring prayer, Letizia asks Ferdinand what was decided, and it turns out that Georgine of all people made the suggestion that the Giebs just take their small chalices home with them after the feast celebrating the end of winter. Ferdinand isn't too happy about that, as those chalices are still divine instruments. Using them isn't easy, but on the flip side of that, they can be used maliciously too. However, the nobles went along with this since it freed up the Blue Priest to focus on the central district, thus improving crop yields and getting more divine protections. Hell, Georgine is even heading to Workstock herself for ceremonies. That's uncharacteristically kind of her. But with all this, and Lanzanov coming early on Ferdinand's plate, he won't really have time to tutor Letizia, and just dumps a mountain of work on her while handling negotiations with the royal family. That sucks, because she's starting to feel like a prisoner in her own room. But Roswitha sees why he's doing it, to protect her from poison and attacks. Too bad Letizia was actually looking forward to spring prayer for a chance to get out and see the duchy for a bit. But as they have this talk, the Giebs are kicked out and sent home as soon as possible. Almost like they're trying to get as many eyes away from the castle. Who'd have thought?
It's not exactly foreshadowing when you already know the conclusion, but damn does it make you sick just watching it play out. This somehow makes Det Lind even worse.
Later, Roswitha went to go see Sergius to ask Ferdinand to lessen Letizia's workload since she's getting depressed, but she never came back. Even by the next day, her apprentice attendant, Ferzila, Stroll's daughter, tries to make the excuse that something probably came up and she just wanted to talk to her son for a while. But after a few days, it's pretty clear something happened to Roswitha. When they send an ordnance, they still reach her, so she's not dead at least. But they're flying behind a series of locked doors that no one has a key to. Well, at least somebody who's not Detlind, so her best bet's gonna be to speak to Ferdinand about that, but that's a few days out because he's so damn busy. Yeah, now she's panicked, because Roswitha was like a second mother to her after she was adopted into Arnsbach. They talk to Sergius, but he hasn't seen her either. They'll search the main building and try to talk to Ferdinand about seeing her sooner, possibly in the Manor Replenishment Hall. And later that night, she gets word that he agreed to. So she races off to the Manor Replenishment Hall, but along the way, she bumps into Leonzio and Detlind slacking off. Yeah, they've taken a meeting in public lately, the reason being, it won't look so bad if people can see them not being all over each other, that way rumors won't spread as easily, right? Well, Detlind asks if Letizia is off to supply mana, and that basically forces her to engage due to status. Polite conversation ensues, where Leonzio offers her some more candy to relieve her stress. Ferzila taste tests it for poison first, and then gives her lady the go-ahead to take some, but as she's sucking on it, a strange bitter taste spreads throughout her mouth. Leonzio then asks her what's the matter, and she simply states that she'll be discussing it with Ferdinand, so don't worry about it. But before she can leave, he offers her yet another party popper and suggests she use that to get Ferdinand to agree. That worked last time. That makes Letizia pretty happy, that someone cares about her situation enough to offer some help. Then she heads off, though Detlind was giving her an oddly blank look throughout that conversation. Wonder what that's about. So she heads into the Manor Replenishment Hall, where she breaks into asking Ferdinand for help. However, her hopes are summarily dashed. He tells her to give up on Roswitha because this is clearly a trap. That's obviously the only reason she's still alive, and it's to lower her guard. That won't do. And as she's fighting back tears, she suddenly remembers what Leonzio said. And like a goddamn sleeper agent, a drug-addled hallucination ensues and makes sure she pulls that popper. But rather than flowers or some other shit, white powder comes flying out. Ferdinand immediately covers his mouth and pushes Letizia back from the cloud, but he still actually inhaled some and calls Rosmine's name out in pain. That's when Ferdinand's charm activates and seems to push whatever influence from Letizia's mind. So, now that she's back to her senses, she rushes over to see if he's okay, but he's clearly not. He then hands her the cage as we saw and tells her to go. Right. If anyone would know what to do, it's Eckhart and Eustace. So she races right out of the hall and the office, confusing pretty much everybody standing guard. But outside the door to the office, Eustace and Eckhart are waiting. She hands them the cage and relays the message, but Eckhart immediately draws his weapon. Yeah, he's about to straight up murk this kid. But as tensions rise and the guards spring into action, Eustace snaps Eckhart out of it and tells him to obey his orders. So, they flee with the cage, where Stroll and Sergius are chasing after them because, well, Eckhart just tried to kill an Archduke candidate. But before anyone can really figure out what's going on, cause Letizia's traumatized, realizing she just killed Ferdinand and Eckhart really scared the shit out of her, Detlind and Leonzio appear out of nowhere. He asks her if she used the party popper and mimes the action while doing so, and immediately it all clicks into place. That this was a setup to get her to kill Ferdinand. Absolutely diabolical that they backed a kid into a corner and then gave her some poison to accidentally use on her teacher. Also, if you remember the prologue, Ferdinand fucking called this shit. So Leonzio flat out states in front of everybody that Letizia just killed Ferdinand and asks Detlind to go retrieve his face stone. She's already wearing the silver cloth, but pops a registration face stone into the door, because we already know that she's not actually the Ob. But Letizia's guard knights all step up to defend her, while Detlind's are looking to take her captive. However, Leonzio speaks up yet again, saying that Letizia made her displeasure over his cruel teaching methods apparent to all who would listen at the Lanzanov Villa. So, obviously she was plotting to kill him. But how could she do that? Simple, like this. As Leonzio pulls out another party popper, and a big cloud of white powder envelops the room. Suddenly all the knights standing on Letizia's side are just flat out gone, with a rain of face stones hitting the ground. Wow, it literally killed them in an instant. It's just her and Ferzila left alive, since the candy they ate actually contained the antidote. Yeah, they gave her some because, you know, it'd be pretty hard if your Patsy was dead. That's when Detlind reappears and binds Letizia in light. She complains about the poison not working on Ferdinand, but explains that she cleared up the mess anyway, all with this big, huge, shit-eating grin on her face. But Detlind makes sure that Letizia knows that she's the one to blame for it. Georgine orchestrated the exact means for all of this to happen, and with the guise of killing their duchy's Ob's king-appointed fiancé, Detlind decides, as the next Zent, that Letizia's fate is to be exiled to Lonzanov with her retainers. How gracious. But as they haul her away to a prison cell to await transport, Strahl and Sergius arrive to quite the sight. Perzila and Letizia tell them about the poison and not to get close, and that's when they make their tactical retreat to avoid dying too. Well, that pisses off Detlind, and Letizia gets hit for it. But in the end, they drag her to a pretty familiar place, where the ordnances flew when trying to locate Roswitha. They open a cell door and go inside for a moment, where the person struggling within suddenly stops. When they come back, they drop a face stone in front of Letizia. That's when they say they're sending Roswitha to Lonzanov with her, but she was just too loud to transport as she was. And like that, Letizia screams out in pain, while Detlind just laughs.
That's stone cold. Any redeeming aspect of Detlind just went out the window this volume, and she's only gonna get worse as this story goes on. But with that, we have an idea of what's going on inside Arensbach with this impending invasion on the horizon. But before we get too excited about that, trust me, I know, we have side stories to cover still. So let's get on into them.
First up is Rosemind's disappearance and return from Sigiswald's perspective. It's right after they delivered mana to the library when Rosemind disappeared, and Hartmut drops down to ask Sigiswald if his lady can read for a bit. That's pretty damn outrageous, but he can tell that something's up, because not even Rosemind is stupid enough to ignore a royal before picking up a book. She usually waits until after for that. So he permits it and they walk back to the farthest hall, with the excuse that Hartmut has to oversee cleanup. That's when Sigiswald slips Hartmut a sound blocker so they can discuss what the hell happened. He explains that she just simply vanished to go see Gramps, but no one really knows who that is or when she'll return. Hopefully soon, I guess. But Ehrenfest would appreciate it if the royals would help keep this a secret until next Earth Day. If she's not back by then, they're gonna need to talk to the king for a plan of action. So the very next week, they instruct Hildebrand to ask about Rosemind's health to keep things secret still. But Sigiswald wants to speak to Anastasius and Eglantine after dinner. We find out that Eglantine has given birth to a daughter at the end of fall. Big shocker. The reason she looked sick wasn't because she was chugging rejuvenation potions and expending too much mana when trying to pray at the shrines. It was because of that. In fact, the god straight up told her to stop offering mana because she was with child. She didn't even know at the time. Now normally she wouldn't be back in the public eye at this point because she would still be taking care of her baby, but the royals are so short on manpower she kinda has to step up. At least do her teaching role. Sigiswald's second wife, the one whose name I cannot fucking pronounce so I'm not gonna try, is handling Eglantine's mana replenishment duties for now. Sigiswald isn't really too happy about this baby in the first place. He had wished that they had waited until he and Adolfina had a son first. Or, for Rosemind to join the royal family. Either way, this made politics a pain in the ass. Of course, Klausenberg's really pushing for more power. At dinner, they discuss their plan of action now that Rosemind is still gone. Funny enough, no one really seems to have noticed her absence. But they will need to figure out what they're gonna do if she doesn't actually come back at all. We find out the king has obtained several protections, but Sigiswald has only gotten 2 subordinates because dude's clearly not taking this seriously. They're both trying to increase their numbers so that they can get the elements necessary, but if Rosemind's not back by the end of winter, they'll have to force Eglantine to get the Grutricite instead. But first they need to confirm what Ehrenfest is going to do, because that duchy doesn't follow noble logic at all. And for that, Sigiswald invites Rosemind's retainers, Charlotte and Wilfried, to a tea party. There they put down a sound blocker and Sigiswald cuts to the chase. Is Rosemind still alive? And Hartmut confirms it, because he's still there. Yeah, he did just publicly admit to being her namesworn with glee, and that her mana is growing even. So thus, they'd like to stick with the story that she's fallen ill. And hopefully she'll be able to make up her classes when she returns. Sure, the royals will permit that, for obvious reasons. He notices Rosemind's absence isn't really bothering Wilfried and Charlotte too much. And of course it isn't. They've been preparing for her to leave for like a year now. Now that would normally come off as criticism of the royal family, especially from someone like Wilfried. But Sigiswald decides to overlook that because he's spoken to Rosemind enough to know that there probably wasn't any deeper meaning. Hell, Wilfried doesn't seem to be too bothered that their engagement is being cancelled either. Isn't that pretty weird? He kinda needed her to become Ob, right? Well, Wilfried openly says that he wasn't a good match for Rosemine, but then offers Sigiswald some advice. Start preparing charms for her now or else he'll struggle to keep up by the time they're married. You know, since she has so goddamn many. That seems pretty weird, but rather than chastise Wilfried for blazingly offering unsolicited advice to a royal, he offers him a cup of tea instead, which is a noble gesture we'll hear more about next side story. The term pretty much came and went without incident. Ortwind came first in class, ending Rosemine's streak, which actually made Frau Larm demand very publicly to know if Rosemine was straight up dead. That led to her being fired. Good riddance. But on a whim, Sigiswald stops by the library one day and bumps into Ferdinand during the tournament. He's standing in front of the statue that Rosemine disappeared at. They both remark about Rosemine's absence and share some small talk before Sigiswald decides to leave. But as he walks away, he hears Ferdinand comment about Rosemine always ruining his plans. Smash cut to Rosemine's return when Sigiswald and Hildebrand race to the farthest hall. But when the door opens, Sigiswald is absolutely stunned by her beauty and miraculous growth spurt. Dude seems to have actually fallen in love here at first sight, despite knowing what she's like on the inside. But when she basically ignores him straight up, he has no choice but to let her go, because she's so focused on something beyond that moment. Next is the Royal Academy without my sister from Charlotte's perspective. Some of these are events I'm skimming because we've already talked about them in the main story, but after Rosemine's gone, her retainers pull Charlotte and Wilfried aside to explain what happened. And their plan is that they're just going to declare that Rosemine fell ill. If she's not back by the time the dedication rituals wrap up in the academy, they'll just say she returned for their one back home. So everyone's on the same page, and it's not like they could tell anyone anyway. The story's simply too absurd. She flat out disappeared in front of a statue to a goddess? Yeah, no one's gonna believe that. Though it's worth noting, pretty much this entire story, Hartmut is super obnoxious, talking about how Rosemine's been growing and how special she is to be whisked away by the gods. And with that zeal, he keeps the students in order through threats of making them memorize Rosemine's saint legend. Yeah, eventually Hersher swings by, demanding to see Rosemine, only because she wants the ingredients to brew. And as we know with her personality, she won't take no for an answer. So Charlotte relents and has Brunhilde take her up to Rosemine's chambers to bring her up to speed, and also give her what she wants. That way she'll leave. In return, she'll keep their secret on the professor's side too. From then on, things are strangely normal. Everyone has basically lulled themselves into a state of assuming she'll be back soon. But also, other duchies aren't really asking too many questions. Partially because Rosemine being sick is a given, but also she finishes her classes so quick, no one really engages with her in the first place aside from Hannelore. Speaking of, she sent books as get well presents. Cool. But the biggest cause of concern is Gentian. She's been awaiting Rosemine's recovery so she could join the library committee. Oh right, she was probably ordered to get close to Rosemine this term. That sucks for her. Anyway, she handed over the documents she promised Rosemine to Wilfried at his dedication ritual, and now Hartmut's transcribing them for his lady so they can be returned. Despite Wilfried's supposed involvement in this research, he's basically pawning off all the socializing it entails onto Charlotte. That's pretty usual though. However, she does consult Brunhilde. Aside from her skills as an attendant used to socializing with top-ranking duchies, she'll be joining the archducal family as soon as she graduates. I mean, not officially, but she's already got a room in the West Building. After the lay noble ceremony, Charlotte gets an invite from Brunhilde for their impending tea party with Sigiswald, where she mentions they probably shouldn't bring their retainers, as this is going to be a sensitive discussion about Rosemine. Yeah, there's obviously still some friction here because Wilfried still hasn't accepted Brunhilde as the second wife, and can't really control his own retainers who still don't know anything about the impending cancellation of his own engagement. They don't really know how bad his position is, and it doesn't seem like Wilfried has put much thought into his future. At the tea party, Charlotte thought she wouldn't really have to worry too much. I mean, this would probably be between Rosemine's retainers and Sigiswald, right? Well, no. Wilfried's been giving some unintentional criticisms towards Sigiswald and the royal family. Or at least that's how most nobles would interpret them. By saying her absence isn't troubling them due to them preparing for the last year, pretty much sounds like he's pissed about the adoption. But Brunhilde saves the day by getting Hartmut to speak up about Rosemine's continued growth. Next, with Wilfried making that remark about the charms for Rosemine, Charlotte damn near dies because of just how rude it was. But Sigiswald offering tea hints that he's probably concerned Wilfried held a grudge at him for losing his position as the next Ob, but that gesture means that the concerns are gone now. So, Wilfried didn't cause any offense. Good. Noble culture's confusing as hell. After Rosemine's retainers go home, the socializing season kicks into gear. A big topic is Charlotte's possible marriage partner, because who the hell is she gonna marry as an intern mob? Brunhilde suggests a younger partner, especially with all these freshly adopted Archduke candidates coming in. But it really goes to show how hard she has it. If Brunhilde gets pregnant, Charlotte will need to marry and become Ob before the child is baptized to curb the Lies Gang's power. So she should probably aim for somebody of a similar rank to Ehrenfest, that way they won't go and push her to be more power hungry. But if Melchior is going to be Ob one day, he should probably aim for a spouse from a higher ranked one. At the graduation, we see Brunhilde and Florencia wore matching hairpins to show their solidarity, also the pecking order, because Brunhilde is keeping her promise to support Florencia as the first wife. And that's pretty much it. We've wrapped the year. But at home, when Rosemine comes back, Charlotte races off to see her and is absolutely shocked. She's changed so much that suddenly Charlotte feels like she's been left behind entirely. But strangely, Wilfried actually breaks the tension with his comment about her growing. Suddenly Charlotte realizes that despite her stunning appearance, she's still her sister on the inside. So she greets her properly. We have their hopes and dreams from Leonzio's perspective. It's right after they locked Letizia up and he and Detlind are heading off to the Lanzenov estate. Basically, she's given Lanzenov free reign to do with Arnsbach as they please. Which they're starting with Letizia and Ferdinand's chambers. They're gonna loot them for any magic tools and face stones they can find, then ship them home with Letizia. Yeah, he feels bad, but what else could he do? In Lanzenov, Letizia will be doted on as a mana-rich woman. She'll most likely be much happier living there than under Detlind, who hates her guts. Detlind sends off an ordinance informing Georgine of their success, though Leonzio advises against that. The reason being, they hadn't actually killed Ferdinand yet like they were supposed to, even if he is indisposed. We find out that Georgine is already waiting as close to the Ehrenfest border as possible to still receive the ordinance. And though Leonzio doesn't know her full plan, he can guess that she's taking Ehrenfest for herself. He actually sees Georgine for who she really is, a cold and calculating woman who has a backup plan at the ready for pretty much any situation you could imagine too. But Detlind plays dumb and acts like it was unreasonable to make sure Ferdinand was dead. But it was because Georgine saw him as a threat in the first place that she ordered Detlind to kill him and give his face stone to Lanzenov. And that's honestly kind of strange because Leonzio barely knows Ferdinand at all, because Detlind made sure to keep them apart. So she says that he's a jealous man getting in her way, Georgine says that he's the greatest threat to her scheme, and Raublut hates his guts for some unknown reason. But Leonzio? He doesn't really have a reason to hate the guy. It was Raublut who insisted that he be killed and sent back as a face stone, with Georgine ordering it to clear her path. But face stones won't really be an issue for Lanzenov after their hunt tonight, because they're gonna have plenty of high quality ones to send back home when they're done with Arnsbach. Anyway, Detlind's lying to her mother, and Leonzio can't really change that because Lanzenov's communication methods don't work in Jürgenschmidt apparently. And also, pretty obviously, he doesn't have a Stab, so he can't send an ordnance himself. Thus, he takes Detlind's arm and escorts her to her carriage because he has to ride in a separate one. That's annoying and confusing because, well, she hangs all over him in public, but then she refuses to be alone with him in private, for whatever weird sense of honor she has. Okay, I guess it doesn't really matter. He climbs into the second carriage with his cousin, who makes the comment about how brutal Jürgenschmidt nobles are. Yeah, seriously. But at least their noble house back in Lanzenov will be more secure after this deal. The three houses in Lanzenov are named after flowers found in Jürgenschmidt, and as such, those are the 3 rooms in the Adelgisa villa. Yes, there's actually supposed to be 3 princesses in there, 1 for each house. They're only taken once every few generations too, to prevent their Jürgenschmidt blood from becoming too thick. But their only duty is to bring forth a son who can obtain a Stab. And once he does, he's sent home to Lanzenov to keep it afloat. That heir will be adopted by the current king he's gonna replace. But since he knows fuck all about the country because he was raised in Jürgenschmidt, usually the family on his mother's side, because that's the only family he has in Lanzenov, has to step up and support him as the next king. Leonzio's grandfather, Chiafredo, married his daughter to his successor, Gervasio, the current king of Lanzenov, but their marriage never actually bore fruit or love. Thus, Leonzio's house has been losing power ever since. Due to the Jürgenschmidt Civil War and subsequent lack of face stone exports, the world at large is transitioning away from mana. Hell, Lanzenov itself has been making massive technological leaps, but a king with a Stab is still necessary to maintain the capital, so they need that villa opened. But Jürgenschmidt's king kept refusing. But then, 2 years ago, out of pretty much nowhere, Lonzanov got a strange letter from Georgine asking if their king knew the Sovereign Knights commander. And I mean, it was so sudden, they didn't really know who she meant. Were they talking about the previous king of Lonzanov, the current king, the previous Knights commander, or the current one? So they sent Leonzio to go investigate to figure it out, and that's when they made contact with Raublut. At the villa, Alstida is waiting with her husband. Nobles being there tend to annoy Leonzio, as their presence pushes his countrymen into the back rooms. The nobles of Jürgenschmidt have basically been acting like it's their house lately, but at the same time, Leonzio does sympathize with Alstida a bit. She didn't really want the job of awe, but she's doing it for her husband, who actually does. But Detlin tells her sister to open the door to the Adelgisa Villa teleportation circle, and that sight makes those from Lonzanov freak out a bit. Magic circles are such a new and amazing thing to them, despite the nobles from Jürgenschmidt not even batting an eye. We're told here the obvious, something people probably figured out ages ago. The previous Ob was killed by Georgine to allow easier access to this teleportation circle. However, they got word that the king was adopting a new daughter, and personnel were busy renovating the villa, so Raublut couldn't move as he pleased. But now that it's empty, they can finally enact their plan. So with the magic circle laid bare, Leonzio wants to go through it because stops are on the other side. Could he actually obtain one too? But before he can move towards it, it activates and Raublut steps off. Detlin welcomes him and informs him that their other guests should be arriving shortly. He smiles and says that he can finally reunite with his lord after so long. Wait, isn't his lord supposed to be the Zent? Oh no. And shortly after, King Gervasio of Lonzanov arrives at the estate, where Raublut kneels before him. He apologizes for not being able to save Ella Marlene, but Gervasio forgives him on the spot, and says he couldn't change her fate. No one besides those two actually recognizes that name, but we learn here that Raublut served as a guard knight to Gervasio at the Adelgisa Villa. So with that out of the way, they step through the teleporter to go enact their plan.
You know, I've been noticing that the last side story of a volume's been dropping hints for the plot of the next book, and this one continues that trend. The Knights Commander used to serve the King of Lonzanov, and that's who they've been collaborating with? God damn. But what's the end goal here? We'll find that out in a few more books. We're officially at the climax for the entire series, poised with a battle for Arensbach, a showdown in Ehrenfest, and an infiltration into the Sovereignty. But before we go ahead and get too excited for those, this volume's wrapped up, which means I should probably do the same for this video with my final thoughts.
This volume really hits the ground running with the full sprint towards the major turning point for this entire series, Rosemine getting the Grutricite. But that's not the end-all be-all, which is a pretty nice twist. Usually a magic tool to rule the entire country, like the Grutricite's been presented thus far, would just be a MacGuffin where everyone recognizes her as the queen right away. But getting a Book of Mestianora is only the first step on the path to becoming Zent, and hers isn't even complete in the first place. So really, this just gives her the tool she needs to save everyone she loves, which makes for a really strong transition into the main conflict, as well as giving us a ton of relevant lore about this world. One of the biggest revelations this volume is how Rosemine came to be, her insane set of circumstances that led to this moment. So we've known since the beginning she's had memories from a previous life, found out later in part 1 that she has the Devouring, and then in part 2, a massive mana capacity. But all of these elements merge to make the absolute anomaly that is Rosemine's existence. Because of her memories, she survived with the Devouring to gain the Mark of Awiga Leap, which also in the process gave her a ton of mana. But also that mark is what let her become Omni-Elemental because her memories piqued Ferdinand's interest enough to search them in the first place. So he had to dye her to do so. But her luck still didn't end there, because the Civil War is what let her even join the temple in the first place to get noticed, also led to the change in curriculum that otherwise would have prevented her from even getting a stop. And what I like is, all of these plot points are built off the foundational elements of this story, mostly introduced in part 1, and they've not stopped shaping the narrative as it's grown. All we really got in this volume was simply a name for the mana clumps in Rosemine's body, despite us learning about her having them way back in part 3. Ferdinand dying her in part 2 didn't really come up since she's been Omni-Elemental for as long as elements have been a thing in this series, but we finally got an explanation for how previous events led to that. This is, again, really good storytelling as it shows long-term commitment. So I have been trying to keep the reveal of the Grutricite somewhat obscured in these videos. The fact is, there's more than one, and what the royal family knows as the Grutricite is the transcribed copy in the Underground Archive. We'll learn more about the history of that next book. But understand that the Book of Mestianora, the divine instrument that is the Grutricite, and the colloquial term Grutricite that is the tool used for interfacing with Jürgenschmidt's foundation, are different things entirely, but also not. Like, they're all copies of the mythical book that Mestianora has, her wisdom, but the form it's given is the symbol of the Zhent and country. That's supposed to be made with the Stab, through the process we've seen Rosemine undergoing since her second year. That's how Zhent candidates are supposed to claim their Book of Mestianora to become Zhent in the first place. But do note, the royal family didn't know this, and that tells us this process has become somewhat twisted. How and why? Next volume. But the issues Jürgenschmidt is facing didn't exactly crop up overnight, or even 10 years ago. This has been centuries in the making. We did get our answers finally on why Georgine targeted the Bible of all things. There was a lot of misdirection going on in part 4 to throw the characters off the trail, and even made the true aim a mystery for the audience, which is a genuine mark of good writing. My guess before this volume had been released was that they needed Rosemine's mana, but no. First, the Bible was stolen, drained of its mana, and then ownership changed, while it was being sent out of the duchy as a gift. But that was all just a red herring to make Rosemine and Ferdinand look incompetent. The real goal of this attack was always the Bible's key, which was in Fran's possession, and not something Rosemine was intimately familiar with. That's how she didn't notice it wasn't her key in the first place, because she just assumed that Gloria overrode the mana in it to make her think it was fake. But again, that's not the case. She replaced the key entirely with Arnsbach's Bible key. But you may be thinking, hold on, didn't Egmont's memories show that Gloria returned the key after swapping its mana with hers? But you gotta understand, Egmont was being heavily manipulated in that scene and not paying the closest of attention. Hell, Rosemine even remarked that she couldn't tell if it was real or fake, and just assumed it was fake until Ferdinand brought up Egmont's memories, where it showed her putting a key back. Not necessarily the key. Egmont probably wouldn't have been able to tell the difference either. So, now we know what the true goal was, and what Grausam sent out of the duchy. Ehrenfest's Bible key, because it's the alternate route to the Foundation. Speaking of foundations in the temple, the first Zhent being a high bishop and connected to religion is back in full force. That's just been a bit of lore to this point, mostly used as a throwaway line to cover for Rosemine's temple connection. But it's slowly made a bigger and bigger impact as this series has gone on. Prayers and ceremonies get more divine protections from the gods, which lowers mana expenditure. We've seen how much divine protections help, but it was just assumed that that was the extent of religion's fall from grace in Jürgenschmidt. People didn't want to pray anymore, so the temple fell out of favor, with families dumping their undesirables there and turning a blind eye. But no, this volume elaborates that the temple was essentially set up to teach candidates how to become Zhent, or at the very least Obs. It was made to get heirs used to ceremonies and get them as many divine protections as possible, which would help them support their duchy and the country in turn. So religion plays a huge role, which I really like as a detail in this series, as it was originally introduced as this thing at the end of part 1 to segue into noble society, but we find out it's not just a creation myth, but literally the entire reason the country exists. Rosemine flat out states this volume the country is a magic circle to contain a Wiegelieb's power. That's why the country is shaped like that, a perfect circle, because it's a magic circle. Who'd have thought? Though I do want to make it clear, magic circles in this world don't actually have to be circular. Rosemine does state that at one point, but the point is, religion grows in importance as this story goes on, from some simple world building to the basis of magic, to actually the whole reason the country exists in the first place. It's one of the best examples of how plot points grow in this series that I've talked about before, and one of the reasons I really love Ascendance of a Bookworm. And lastly, we did see Leonzio present Det Lind with a necklace in the epilogue. He does that at the feast in front of Letizia, and she's the one who elaborates that this is what a Jürgenschmidt proposal actually looks like. Now, we've seen proposals before, like even with Det Lind, but also Brunhilde, but the proposal face stones aren't exactly elaborated on in those scenes. And it's only later we're told that Brunhilde is wearing hers around her neck, so that's how she's treated as a member of the archducal family. So this scene draws the actual connection and, finally, elaborates on the remark that Ferdinand made at the end of part 4 to Sylvester, about how at least he didn't give Rosemine a necklace. That's what the meaning was all the way back then, that he didn't propose to her despite how exorbitant the hair stick he got her was. Now the obvious comparison would be, wait, didn't Sylvester give her a necklace before she was adopted? And yes, he did. But because of her age and the fact that it was an adoption contract face stone, not a proposal one, that's a wildly different meaning than the sort of face stone given during an engagement. So, it's not the same.
So that's it. We wrapped up this volume. Rosemine started her 4th year, only for it to be cut short by the fabled Gruchicite landing in her lap. And now she's accidentally uncovered Georgine's plot and finding out that Ferdinand's life is in peril. So what's Rosemine gonna do? Obviously steal Arnsbach's foundation and save Ferdinand's life. Or at least that's the plan. But we'll have to see about that next time. For now though, hey, you've made it to the end of the video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and do all the other YouTube stuff to help the channel grow. You can also join my Discord with a link down in the description. And if you really want to support me, you can head on over to my Patreon and pick up some extra perks. And speaking of Patreon, I'd like to give a special thanks to Autumn Stott, JMonth33A, Lalexis, Pokeflute, Robin DBL, Samuel Chen, Sazi, Tristan, and Vonstrom for their continued support. Thanks for watching.